Welcome and introductions. We all know each other, right? We don't have to do that one more time. Okay, yeah. You want to, sir, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Alan Prendergast, I'm Westport.
Got it. Nice to come. Alan Prendergast from Westport.
Okay, great. Hi, Alan Prendergast.
Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Matt and I'm Maria's intern.
Yeah, so Matt's coming along to help out. Make sure that tapes get done and stuff like that. I need
Are you going to do
organization.
that same thing to him that you did to the last intern?
Oh, for God's
sorry.
sakes. Hey. I know. You know, I don't know if we're going to have to limit you getting another hip replacement or something, you know? Maybe it's the drugs.
I'm almost undone. No, I'm almost undone. It's incredible.
All right.
I'm telling you. Sorry. Go ahead. I just don't have that.
So let's get started real quickly. Report of the NAP committee.
Sure, yeah, I'll report from the NAP committee. So we went to neighborhoods and planning. That's what the NAP stands for, and it's a city council committee. That's where we take anything that's going to city council. We introduce that information at the committee so they have a chance to review it before it's carried on to city council floor. So I presented the zoning, and Kelly was there and talked about the progress of the implementation committees and the discussion with the neighborhoods. Paul was also there, and there were certainly more people there than just me, which I was the only guy at planning board, and other than the community members, we were happy that you guys could attend. They passed the zoning on to the city council floor. It's going to first reading on the 1st of June, which is kind of a non-event, so just kind of read it. And then public hearing on June 22nd. So come to the meeting and speak about zoning. We certainly will be there to talk about this process. It's a public hearing similar to planning board, so we hope to see you there.
And as we go through the agenda tonight, we'll talk more about the council schedule on multiple things, but because council's got a lot of stuff, so we are not, I think, the first public hearing that night, and because council's trying to wind up a lot of things before they shift to the new council, their Monday nights are really intense. So we think this public hearing may make it about 8 o'clock at night or something like that to be able to do that, but we'll get you guys more details and we'll talk about it some more. CSU bill signing ceremony, Mr. Zapien, David, all of you guys were there. Thank you so very much. It was great. It was really great. It was the mayor, a lot of legislators, all the legislators who basically were prime sponsors of the bill. Jocelyn's not here, so I'll do that report on that end.
Correct.
And it was, okay.
Mayor wasn't there.
Oh, excuse me, the governor.
Yeah.
I still call him the mayor. My apologies. Hickenlooper was there.
I want to emphasize, the mayor wasn't there.
The mayor was not there, but that's not because that we tried really hard to get him there. Kerry Kennedy, the deputy mayor, was there, and a lot of other people from the city were there. But
Mayor wasn't there though.
I heard you loud and clear.
But he wanted to be there,
He wanted to be there, John.
in the worst
He
way.
sent you his personal wishes,
I want
right?
to go to heaven too.
He was there in spirit.
He was there in spirit. It's gonna be a long night.
John said he needs painkillers.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, the bill is law, and we'll talk more, about it in terms of as we get into some of this stuff later on. Mr. Lead, perfect arrival time. You want to talk about the Executive Oversight Committee? Because we do need to talk through about a selection process and the interim Executive Oversight Committee for this project.
You have about 7.5 minutes.
I'll take less than that. So,
That's right, that's good.
EOC, interim governance structure for the National Western. So obviously the goal here is how do we keep the project moving forward until a more formal or permanent governance structure is in place. So the mayor has stood up what we're calling an Executive Oversight Committee that includes representatives from the city, from the National Western, from CSU, and then our intent is to add a representative from this body to the EOC. And that EOC is really the coordinating body that will help move the master plan in an interim basis from where it stands today until the more formal governance structure is stood up. We don't have a timeline yet for that formal governance. But so that we'll need a representative on the EOC. That's the executive body. And then there are two formal subcommittees. One around events, so an event programming advisory subcommittee. That subcommittee is chaired by Ed Nichols from History Colorado and from George Sparks from Museum of Nature and Science. So those are two of the MOU partners. And the intent of that group is to really, we talk about creating a 365-day-a-year place from both an events perspective and a partnership perspective. So that group will really spend their time together thinking about how you start to build a year-round program. And part of that is certainly part of the neighborhood, associated neighborhood experience, and the role of the neighborhood in that experience. So that's when we want a representative from the community on what we call EPAS. And then the second subcommittee is the Capital Funding Alignment Subcommittee. And the intent of that committee, although more technical in nature, we also want a representative from this group on it. And that group looks at all the different funding streams that we were starting to assemble for this project. And we start to work through timing. There are agreements that have to be created. There are requirements that will have to be discussed. But in full transparency, we want to make sure that this committee has a representative on that group as well. So those are the two formal working groups that will report up to the EOC, report out to they'll have a standing report out to the EOC. The EOC meets, right now we're scheduled to meet basically every bi-monthly, so every 2 weeks. That group is meeting for a couple of hours. Right now that we've set a date for Thursdays, but obviously that's can be subject to change once.
You ought to give them what time you meet.
Sure, Thursday, so it's Thursday, it took the place of a planning committee we had, but it's Thursdays from 1:30 to 3. The times for...
Is there one, excuse me, where do they meet and are they open, can you observe?
They are, so they meet, right now we're meeting at the city building. They're most likely going to be moved to the 12th floor, which is the city attorney's office, has this really nice big conference room. We'll move them up to that floor. Yes, I mean, they're open meeting. Now, there's not a ton of room in these, but certainly, again, the goal is to be transparent to this body as we work through those issues. Now, there will be topics like real estate transactions, the thing that that we, when we're negotiating deals, there's certainly things where the formal members of the committee might call for an executive session to discuss specific things we're negotiating. So within the parameters that our city council or any of us operate on, we would operate that group under those same guidelines. So if we have visitors, we would ask those visitors to leave for executive session, and then once the executive session is over, they can come back.
But clearly, if you're a member of the EOC, you stay in executive session.
If you are a member of the EOC, you would stay and be a part of that executive session. The two subcommittees have not set times yet to meet. They haven't started meeting yet. So we would work with the chairs of those committees and the members to set those dates. But right now, the goal would be probably at a minimum once a month. Some the capital alignment committee may have to meet more frequently because there are things we need to do to get it maybe to the ballot, or things we need to do to prepare for the funding. But that will be determined by the committee, by the subcommittee. So we need representatives from this, 3 representatives from this.
For each of those committees.
One for each. Yeah.
Was it, you might have just done shorthand, but you said that City, National Western, and CSU is on the EOC. Are the other MOU partners on the EOC?
They are
too?
not.
They're not? The museum's not on the EOC?
So the way we're structuring this, because the EOC is specifically focused on what we'll call the investment partners. All right, so that CSU now through the state, as well as fundraising, they have to do $16.2 million as part of RTA, and then the National Western, which is contributing up to $125 million, $50 million of that cash contribution. Our 2 other MOU partners are chairing our events program advisory committee, and they are excited about chairing that subcommittee. So that is a really important committee, because this campus doesn't work if it's not busy. And having a guy like George Sparks and Ed Nichols that are really masters at creating events and building events and brings years of experience, they want to chair that. They wanted to chair that subcommittee. Yes, sir.
I may be a little overcautious here, but executive sessions, in this committee, since it's public business, aren't they subject to open meetings rules?
Yeah,
and regulations?
absolutely, but there are things even within public entities where executive session can be called because you're negotiating some deal. And there has to be a discussion about deal points that have to be discussed
I
among
guess
the members.
that's what my concern is, over what might be the deal.
All right, well, ultimately though, John, the deal, whatever the deal may be, becomes a public document, it has to be voted on, whether it be by council or what have you. But you can't.
Maybe I'm overcautious about it.
No, I mean,
It's usually, I think it's fair to say, John, that it's usually attributed to real estate.
Yeah,
Since
Or
real estate has to be
personnel
acquired or personnel matters.
those are the two.
I don't know, I know personnel because I went through that.
And litigation matters.
And litigation matters.
Yeah, litigation as well. Okay, I just, maybe I'm overcautious, but I don't want anything
Oh, no.
to possibly jeopardize our efforts here.
We share that, same. I mean, the goal is to be as transparent as we need to be for not just this committee, but the public as a whole.
So here's our thought process to start this discussion, so as we get a long agenda we need to think it through. You guys self-selected for the retreat way back when for CSU. We absolutely think it needs to be a self-selection process. So I think in all fairness to everybody, I know we have some people who are not here tonight, I think we need to put out a description of what the structure is, who already sits on those committees, who is yet to be determined, because we need to elect 3 people. So what the times are, what the normal schedules are, so everybody understands. Again, those 2 other committees are yet to be determined, like Kelly said. And then I think we need to also put on sort of responsibilities or, sort of of those committees, so the EOC and the 2 subcommittees, like Kelly just explained, in paper. And I think you all need to think through, and then you need to decide whether you want to submit yourself to be considered for one of these committees. And then we'll open it up to the committee to vote on it. And all of it. Obviously, the EOC just had its first meeting,
Which was more of an organizing.
which is more of an organizing meeting just to get the ball rolling. So it's not like anything major has been done, but clearly the mayor and Kelly and everybody has made a recommendation that there ought to be a voting EOC, a voting community member on each one of these committees. John?
I want you to talk about this later because you brought the subject up just now and maybe you didn't realize it. But where the hell are the other members of this committee?
Okay, can
And
we
we're gonna have to
talk
address
about,
that.
I know
We
we,
have to address that. Either going to be here and do what is asked of you or what you feel like you can do, or make room for someone else that can.
John, can we
Yes,
refer that
please,
to
later.
amendment and to
Yeah.
section 6 of the, number 6 on this agenda?
Good.
Okay, thank you, that will be addressed. So I think that's the best way, and then we'll recommend a guideline, because we're going to have to move
So
quickly.
as part of the roundup, which will go out Tuesday, we can include that description of each, as well as meeting times. Again, the meeting times aren't set for the 2 subcommittees. From the
Right.
council, we start thinking it'll be probably at least for an hour, at least once a month.
So we will do that, yeah.
I just want people here now to feel they can put input even into this preliminary thinking.
Oh, absolutely.
Are we going to talk about it now a little bit?
Yep.
Okay, I just want to throw on the table that I think one very helpful thing would be for the subcommittees, and is that we understand what the loop is, like clarify how the loop and exchange, what is the obligation of the individuals to both report out into this infrastructure and bring
Information back.
information back and responses back from a broader scope. And I think that was one of the things that we didn't develop before that I think I know it's what everybody instinctivly wants to do, but if we elevate it, that would be great.
So
Great.
my expectation, at least reporting, obviously, the 2 subcommittees report up to the EOC, but to report back out, I would expect the members of this committee to provide standing feedback on reporting out on your respective. So if you're on the EPAS, then you would be the person responsible for talking about what came out of the event program advisory subcommittee.
it.
Yeah, I think,
We're just going to put it in there.
yeah, I think going forward, when the meetings are elected, I think there's going to be standing agenda items of whoever the representative is of the EOC, whoever the representative is on the capital committee, and whoever the neighborhood representatives is of the programming committee. And I think they have a responsibility to not only gather input, not just in the meeting, but outside of the meeting, right?
Yeah,
And talk to
so I'm
people
saying,
and be able to do that. I mean, these are real big committee assignments that, you know, are going to happen. It's really important stuff. It's going to define the future of the center. So yes, absolutely, we'll do that.
What kind
Yeah,
what kind of timeline do we have to make these decisions on whether we want to be involved in this or not?
Well, I think in all fairness, I mean, the problem is they did have an organizational meeting, but there's not a lot. And we can tell you when the meetings are going to be open.
Over the next 30 days.
I think we don't want to be in a situation where we send you the information and say, okay, you've got 24 hours to decide, right?
Right.
So, which is sometimes we've done that, which has not been worked out really well.
I would
So,
say we could have a decision, or, I mean, because you all need to think about it, right? I mean, these are commitments, but 30 day over, I would like within 30 days of you getting the information to have identified
when do
who
we meet
the
in June?
representatives are. That gives you some time to talk amongst yourselves, to, you know, think about, and the descriptions will help, right? Obviously,
Right.
if you have a specific interest, then you can kind of self-select.
So we meet, I believe, and I'm doing this by memory, the 26th or the 27th of June next.
25th.
25th? Okay, close. So what about if we put out information right away, give you guys at least 2 weeks to think about it, people then submit names and whatever, and then we'll hold an election on the 25th?
The only thing I don't like about that is I really wish that people had had an opportunity to talk, to have some kind of a, the reasons people wanted to do things I think are important, and us knowing why the respective, I mean, if
Got it.
somebody put
I see
their
what you're
name
saying.
in that I didn't actually know them.
Got it.
So, somehow I feel like I'd rather us talk to each other. I'm not so sure I want to have people do resumes and all that crap.
Right,
you
that's
know,
a fair
but-
statement.
Yeah, but just
The bios that we did last time, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to do it.
Well, you can call it a mini campaign, but,
Well, I don't want to think of it that way. I just feel like we're trying to understand what we need and what works from within what we are. And we have to somehow talk about it. It's not just a list of names. That's all. I feel that way.
right, that's a fair statement, that's a fair statement. We're open for input. Why don't we just put out the stuff and the information first and think through some
And if
timing?
you have questions, I mean, once we send it out, if you have questions, fire the questions back through Roger, and then we'll get the answers out. So if you need clarifying, if there are clarifying statements or whatever, then we'll do that. So you have all the information you can to decide what committee members and certain.
Yep,
What John was saying, if you're gonna get on a committee, make sure you show up. You know.
Because we do take attendance. We will take attendance, and there will be meeting minutes, and, I mean, these are formal bodies that are going to be making recommendations ultimately to the mayor on a broad spectrum of issues around this facility, and if you're not there, that will be reflected in the meeting minutes.
we may have to institute if you miss, more than 3 meetings without having an excuse or something, I mean, whatever, you can't have, I mean, you're absolutely right, you got to show up.
Well, we're going to be talking about that here too, so
That's right.
make it
Yeah.
important.
Okay?
Kelly,
Kelly.
thanks for giving us an opportunity to be represented
No, absolutely.
within
And
that.
and that's a direct feedback from you guys. I mean,
Oh, no,
I
we
think we're
didn't.
trying to be respectful of the fact that you've asked to be involved in the.
Yeah.
Along those
Thanks
lines,
to us for asking.
before you leave,
Yes, sir.
on this issue, the person that comes, that goes to the EOC, do they absolutely necessary that they come out of this body?
That would be a preference because.
I know, but
Yeah.
is it absolutely necessary?
I would say yes.
Okay, thank you.
I would say.
I think it's a requirement.
Yeah,
I
they have
don't
all the
think of
background
a
of what
person
they've
that has
done
no
in the last 2
background
years.
to be effective,
Yeah.
both for the communities or for the work that they.
Well, that's the reason why I brought that up, because I would think that, personally, I would like to see someone on that committee that would have a strong sense of advocacy for whatever purpose comes up at that time, And, okay, that's why I brought it up.
And On the voting scope, and is each MOU partner have one vote on the, how is that going to be structured? And
The 9 members of the committee, EOC, I can't speak to the subcommittees because they haven't been formally set yet, but
9 members.
there's 9 members of the EOC.
Okay, okay, what are the 9, what's the breakout of the 9? I just saw the 3.
So the 9 members, so me, I'll count me first. Me, I chair that committee.
Carrie Kennedy, who's here.
Carrie Kennedy, our Chief Financial Officer. Albus Brooks, who will now represent this district, Mr. City Councilperson. Ron Williams, the Chairman of the Western Stock Show Association. Paul Andrews, the President and CEO of the National Western Stock Show. Tony Frank, the President of Colorado State University. And I can send these, I'll send these.
We'll put them all out on the paper, yeah.
So you don't miss.
Diane Barrett.
Diane Barrett, the Chief Project Officer for City.
And Crystal.
And Crystal D. Herrera, who's the Deputy City Attorney.
And where is CSU?
The President of the University,
Oh,
Tony
that's
Frank.
Tony.
And when he can't be there, Amy Parsons would represent him.
And then one NWCCAC person.
Yes.
Correct.
Well, I'm glad this is happening. And I want us to think about, as we understand this, like whether maybe the people that I hope that there's strong neighborhood representation on this. And I'm trying to see how the voting, and I don't want the representation to be assumed it's there because there's an elected official there. I want it to be grassroots. I do personally. So I just want to observe that we're on this committee, we're on this with one vote from the NWCAC, and we have to think about what that would be, because that doesn't give us an opportunity for a full demographic mix.
Well, that's why we have one on each committee, right? So that's why you have 3.
One on each
You actually
committee.
have 3 in total.
We have one voting on the.
Right.
On the ELC.
Can the 3 people vote, one from, can we have it so that the individuals from the subcommittee can vote as well as the?
They will vote on their subcommittees. They will not vote as part of the EOC.
Well, okay, I'm raising questions because it's like this is, and I don't want this to feel at all like I'm, opposed to anything. I just want to understand what the, let's call it stakeholder balance is here, because there's been nothing said about assuring that there's some criteria that residents would be a priority from the neighborhoods selecting toward these 3 positions. And that for me, that's what coming to the table is. Having people at the table is having residents. We haven't gotten into that. We're going to have preliminary, and not to the exclusion of, but in balance with, is what I want to say. Because if you're going to put out the preliminary, and then we're going to somehow vote in June.
But let's talk about, and I appreciate the dialogue, right? So take it in context to the fact that this standing committee remains in place and has a huge voice collectively in helping advance the plan. We're going to stand up the 2 implementation committees for the neighborhoods, and I brought handouts for that, which will be the majority representation on the 2 implementation committees, one for Globeville, one for Larry Swansea, will be made up of residents or business owners, property owners, for those 2, which will also have input, because remember, the National Western Master Plan acts as an implementing plan for the 2 neighborhood plans, right? So when you look at the totality of the mix of neighborhood representation that will impact the improvements to this region, there is a large number of residents that are helping drive decisions around how we get from point A to point B.
Which is a case in point for having a proportionate voting impact at the different decision-making levels. That's I just want us to be aware and feel it through that way. That's all. This may be a new. I appreciate the process being created, and I just want us to be
We're only one vote on the whole thing, so.
set up
As a
now.
resident, we're not looking at much of an input other than just one vote.
As it's set up, yeah.
Yeah, the way it's structured right now, so. All we're really doing is just taking one vote.
Well, somewhere, excuse me for what that. Somewhere along this process, we're gonna have to say, look, you know, obviously everyone's here in their self-interest. And from what I can see in the last couple of years, there hasn't been any conflict of self-interest. I think we've moved along more on our the mutual interests that we share. So, and I think we've had pretty decent success in doing so. And
It's a great success.
I would say that if we continue along those lines in the spirit of the camaraderie that we've built, openness, having everything out so that everyone understands what's going on. That's why I brought that up about the executive sessions. And there's enough
Goodwill.
ambition and feeling in this room and the people that I've seen here that we can get this thing done. And whoever goes on those committees will certainly have the support of everyone in this room, I feel, anyway. So let's get it moving.
Yeah, and I would also add, I mean, Kelly, having you participate in these meetings, having a chance to hear this larger group and the feedback and the conversations, John, that we've had, I mean, knowing that he's the chair of the EOC, I think also helps. So, I mean, whether it's one vote, but I think that this voice is much louder than just the representation of one vote. And so I would have to think that, you know, be optimistic that I think we can be effective with a member and the representation on the committees as well.
Having Kelly here as head of that committee, it's better than having the mayor come down.
I agree.
But he's here in spirit.
You should make sure that gets
Well, maybe, you know, look, this is, I mean, and I appreciate, I mean, look, and I'll give you one example, and I know we had to move on. And we set out a set of guiding principles, right? And I would expect this committee, this group, as well as all the working committees are constantly going back to those operating principles that we laid out in the master plan, which we adopted, as well as we get into the details of phasing, right? A phasing plan, right? We better deliver what we say we're delivering. So there's shared accountability around the implementation of the project or projects.
Yeah, and nothing I'm saying is in opposition to anything
Right.
that has been said. I'm just reinforcing. To me, it's more having a broad scope of insight. It's not a territorial statement. It's just having a broad scope of insight, that's all.
So our responsibility is to get you guys as much information on all of this, working with Kelly's staff and ours to get it out to you as soon as possible. And we'll think through timing and how we can get this done as efficiently as possible so we can get representation there. Next thing is updates and discussions. Eric, Steve, and Kelly. Who wants to kick it off?
I vote for Steve.
Vote for Eric.
Go for it. Okay, so we will, this is the handout that we gave out last meeting. For those that don't know me, my name is Eric Shaffrin, and Kelly brought me on to help manage the project, manage kind of the implementation of National Western. So what you have in front of you is an outline of, and they're basically all critical path activities, but I've broken them down into critical path activities and other activities which are only marginally less critical for the success of the project. But I'll go through some of them, Kelly will take some of them, and Steve will take others. And feel free to jump in with questions at any time. So land acquisition, obviously without land, we don't have a project. We own about a little more than 2/3 of the overall land that is defined within the master plan, but we've got to acquire the rest. And the rest of the land is owned by a collection of homeowners, business owners, rail. There's a lot of property that's owned by CDOT. And so we will be undertaking over the next several years a process for acquiring that land so that we can consolidate and settle the ground that we need to actually activate the master plan. And obviously, if we can't buy the land, then we have to rethink certain aspects of the master plan that are affected by the land that we can't buy. So from a process perspective, right now we're starting with opportunistic, what we call opportunistic land acquisitions, which are basically folks that have come to us that have said, we know you are going to buy the land, we'd love to sell it to you now. So we've actually started conversations with several of those property owners already. And I think it's a wonderful start to the process. It's a wonderful good faith start to a process of land acquisition, which can, in many cases, be difficult and challenging. And then, as funding becomes available into next year, which we'll talk about, which which Kelly and Terry will be talking about later in the meeting, then we'll really start with the more proactive land acquisition program, which will be the bulk of the land acquisition, which is between 60 and 80 acres of land in total.
I'm sorry, Eric,
yes.
60 to 80 acres is what needs to be acquired to complete the full master plan.
Exactly.
How many different owners, or how many different parcels?
So we have around 40 different owners, between 35 and 40 different owners of property.
There's a question
Yes.
behind you.
Is the city going to, whatever we say somebody doesn't, you need this land, try to make it work. Is the city going to impose eminent domain or the economic, it's not, it's eminent domain or the economic development section that they can use the right to acquire the property. Will the city call back or just those type of taxes to acquire the property?
I would say that the official strategy has not been fully developed, but it's definitely, call it a last case tool in the city's toolkit. As something that if they have to in order to fully activate the campus, then that's something that they would consider. Any other questions on land acquisition? Okay. So rail consolidation. So pretty much part and parcel with buying the land. As you know, there's a lot of rail that runs through our property. We have 3 runs of trackage that come through that run north to south through the property. We've got BNSF, which we have no intention of moving at all. And of course, it's not worth any of our time, and plus RTD is putting in their new commuter rail along the eastern edge of that. So the BN stays where it is. We'll be doing upgrades specifically to the Marion Underpass, and we'll be working very closely with RTD on the new commuter rail station at 49. And then we have 2 runs of trackage that are owned by Denver Rock Island Railroad, the short line rail that has about 19 miles of track that run through the city. And we've started conversations with Denver Rock Island to consolidate those 2 runs of trackage into a single run that would have basically three tracks in it, so that we can minimize the dissection of the campus and make it a little bit easier to get through. So those conversations have started, and they will probably be ongoing for a long time because things move slowly in the rail world, which is understandable. But we started the conversations, and so far they've been willing to come to the table. We're going to be entering agreements with them to start the design of the consolidated rail. We'll be working closely with them to make sure they have buy-in throughout the process. And we recognize that it's going to take a long time, and we have to make sure that they're made whole through that process. So that's the plan on the rail.
Question.
Yes?
On the rail line, where will the consolidation locate to?
So, okay, so the map that you have in front of you, which is very small, but I'll point it out to you on this map. Basically, the 2 runs are there and there, and we consolidated to the middle. So
the existing line along the National Western Drive will be eliminated?
no, that's where it will be consolidated to.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll be consolidating the 2 runs to where the existing National Western Drive is, and we'll actually be moving the existing National Western Drive to the location where the track currently is along the river. And we'll be moving that track to the center. So we're kind of swapping. So we'll be moving National Western Drive out and swapping the rail along the river inboard to where the National Western Drive is now.
So what effect will the relocated lines have on future activities in that area?
So the effect will be minimized. By consolidating the 2 into 1, it will be minimized. And the goal is to have crossings, so there are currently 3 crossings planned in order to make sure that pedestrians and cars can get through the campus. So we've got Betty Cram Drive that will come through, and that will be an at-grade crossing. We've got the connection between the stockyards and the livestock building and the equestrian buildings, which will be a below-grade crossing underneath a 200-foot-long bridge. So the track will run along the bridge, and pedestrians will be able to walk freely underneath. And then there will be a 3rd crossing to the north that will be primarily for operations, to make sure that National Western and whomever is using the campus is able to circulate through and also getting cattle from the heifer market, herd sire spaces down to the south.
So John, I'm sorry, if I can add, the huge benefits that are triggered from a community perspective are, one, we open up the Mile River that you can't get access to, and by reclaiming the riverfront, we create almost 12 acres of new open space along the river that does not exist today, because you can't use it.
In the relocation
Yes.
line, will the parking of tanker cars and junk cars that come from scrap yards and that, will that be eliminated or minimized? Or?
I would say likely not, because it will be their line, and they'll have the right to use their line for whatever they would like to use it for. We'll be working closely with them and negotiating as much as we can, as much as within our right to negotiate. But at the end of the day, the project will be paying for new rail lines that will essentially be Denver Rock Island's lines, and they'll have the right to use them however they'd like to use them.
I have a question about, if you're going to be going along that, I guess that'd be considered the east side of the river.
Yes.
All right, how is that going to affect that metro sewer line that runs down through there?
So we're figuring out now, there's a lot going on as it relates to those sewer lines, to those big 72-inch massive pipes. So there's a couple of things. Number one, we've incorporated it into the master plan. As the master plan was adopted in March by City Council, that is actually buried under dirt. And the space between the new National Western Drive and the Delgany Interceptor and those pipes is essentially the water detention for the entire campus. So all the water during a storm runs to the west towards the river, and that space between the street and the pipes, the depression that's created, is essentially where water retention would be. Now the other thing that's going on is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is currently doing a study on the Platte River from downtown all the way up to 58th. Given the floods from a year and a half ago, they're very focused on reclaiming the river to both keep the 100-year floodplain within the river wherever possible, and also at the same time to restore natural environments. And so we're in conversations with them right now about potentially, and this is very much potential, moving the interceptor elsewhere. Potentially moving it inboard so that it's under the street, burying it deeper. We don't know yet, but the Army Corps is very interested in beautifying the space, in making that stretch of river more accessible. So we don't really have clarity on what they would want to do with it yet, but we're in conversations with them. But the goal is to minimize the visual impact.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess I still have a concern though, because from what I understand of that area down there, we have metro wastewater pipe that runs, which is buried on the west side of the river, and then we have the one that kind of sits out of the ground on the east side.
Right.
And I guess there's a concern there if that one on the east side is eliminated, which then we'll have to have somewhere for that to go, and then so what's going to happen on the west side of the river?
Yeah, that I don't know right now. I don't know if I don't think we have an understanding yet of that. And I don't know if is that something that would be.
But I think to be clearer to answer your question is, the intent right now is either one or two options, subject to the Army Corps doing more due diligence. Is either we're going to bury it, meaning we're going to cover the pipe up, or two, they're going to look at a strategy that would either relocate it on site or do something to get the obstruction gone so that we can restore the river. Yeah. That's their goal too.
Yeah, because right now the pipe is so close to the river that it doesn't fully enable us to activate the banks, because the distance between the pipes and the bank is just so short. So we would love to be able to move it inboard in a way that enables us to activate those banks.
David, wait. Oh, go ahead, Vern.
I guess the main thing is as you kind of begin to develop this more and we get deeper into this, I'm sure the community would like to have a clear understanding before anything is set in place, specifically
Absolutely.
how that's going to be addressed.
And I believe the Army Corps is hosting public meetings throughout their process. So
Do we know when those are?
So we can find out.
it would be helpful for us to put those on the roundup, so people would understand where the meetings are and whatever,
Well,
so.
Bert, I think to your point too, I think that's another reason why we proactively want to get this master planning going on, the Elegant Lawns, the Riverside Park, and that West Bank, right, so that we can help guide and provide direction to the Army Corps for what we want, you want, the neighborhoods want, relative to activating all that space. So the more we can be proactive about it, I think it will help us.
Okay.
Go ahead, question?
Yeah, you got a question?
You said in the beginning, there's some about accessing through the north. Is that 51st?
Is that what, sorry?
Is that 51st?
No, this is south of Grace
Oh,
Court,
okay.
so within the campus.
Within the campus?
Yeah,
Thank
within
you.
the campus.
David?
Now, burying that pipe or moving it, is that gonna come out of 856 million?
No, if it's, well, the burying, yes, because that's within the project. But if the Army Corps decides to move it, that's federal funds.
We like that.
So when, if it's appropriate, should we approach quiet train crossings like they've done in some of the other? I know they cost more and everything, but is this where we could start advocating for that a little bit? You know what I'm talking about? The where they're built in the manner that the traffic, the auto driver, pedestrian, et cetera, is blocked from doing the things that would get them killed, so the whistles aren't as necessary.
Gotcha.
I mean, they've done that.
Quiet zones, you mean?
Quiet zones, thank you,
Yeah.
I'm looking for the term. And there is a specific technology that is being used west of us, I think in Arvada. They funded it. And I really would like us to put that on the table, because even if you can't see the houses that are 3/4 of a mile away, they are there. And anyway, it would be really great if we could, is this an appropriate place to make a note and say, let's check into
Absolutely.
this?
I think it's a great suggestion. It's something that, so we're probably 8 months or so away from actually starting design. And that's something that we would want to incorporate into the specifications for the design.
Right.
But it's absolutely a great thing, a great suggestion.
I just want you to make note, maybe it's reflective of my age, but
Are you talking?
thinking about the Western heritage, to me, there's somewhat of a nostalgic feeling to hear the lone whistle in the night of the iron horse going down the road.
Oh, my
Well,
God.
the good news is,
Oh, my God.
John, you missed your calling as a cowboy.
That's a nice quote, John. I like that on the wall.
You know what, a lot of people, I come from a railroad family.
Yeah, really?
It does. You know, I have some
Get
strong
that on
feelings
your
about that. And some of the damn city slickers now, you know, they get worried about, you know, a horn blowing down there. Okay, fine, it's a different opinion.
Okay, I'm
Let's
really,
move on.
we're not going to move on with that
Put that on this
misperception.
porch.
Okay.
I love train horns. I've seen the documentary of the guy that collects them. I adore them. The people in the neighborhoods that need to get up and work, that need to go to sleep, we have to take, this is our job, is to not do it for just us, but for the entire environment of the neighborhoods. I am certain we're still going to have horns there, and if we want to have a historic, name it, it's times we're going to blow the horns on purpose because it's a historic, I'm all for it. I love horns. I am one heck of a novice city slicker, so I'll teach you that. We'll get the horses out and we'll see. But anyway, that's what it's not to the loss of history, it's to the whole purpose we're here for is to have the compatibility.
That needs to be the last call signal before the bars close.
Yeah, there you go.
Before we have a shootout at the National Western Corral, we'll move on because I'm sure we'll have more conversations on this as we move forward. So back to you, Eric.
Okay, so the next, anything left other than that on rail? I think we covered rail.
I think John Sapien wants to bring steam engines back as well.
Yes. So environmental investigations. Obviously, we've got to, if we're going to build on the ground, we've got to know what's in the ground, both what's in the ground and what's in the buildings. So we've started a process already. The Department of Environmental Health has been working with National Western on the property that they own and within the property that the city owns to conduct preliminary investigations. So we're doing a phase 1 light, which is essentially an analysis of the historical records, the historical uses of the site, and we started doing invasive boring. So we're actually going out, drilling holes, and testing the ground. We hope to have the results from that study to share with you guys within the next 2 months. We expect preliminary report back from the consultants, I think in 3 weeks or so, and then the city's got to do its review, its questioning, probably additional work will have to be done, and then once we have a final report, we can share that with the group. I can tell you that the preliminary results that we've gotten back are really not anything alarming or surprising. We found buried, demolished in-place buildings, which we knew we would find. We've found some surface contamination, but less than we expected to find. And so far, no white elephants. So we haven't found anything out of the norm yet through the investigations.
How many test holes are going to be drilled?
So I knew someone was going to ask me that. I think it's between 25 and 30. And one thing that's important to remember is right now it's just on National Western and city-owned property. So we've got obviously the 80 acres or so that we don't own, that as we take down new properties, we'll do the investigations of those properties as well.
I'm going to ask a question.
Yes.
In the areas that we're going to be doing some of the connectivity and having to, obviously, we're looking at a massive amount of excavation going on there.
Yes.
Does the environmental testing that's going on, will they be a part, will these areas be a part of some of this testing where you're going to be making the connectivity, or are you just doing on the actual site?
No, absolutely. Anywhere where we're disturbing. I mean, our goal, so what the phase one does is it tells us where we should focus our efforts. So, if we do a historical analysis of a specific part of the site and determine that there was a dry cleaner there, then that's an area where we want to do additional borings. And it's call it program agnostic, meaning it doesn't matter what we plan on putting there. Our goal is to understand the environmental condition of the entire site. So whether we're planning on putting a road there or a building there, if it's an area where we're concerned about contamination, we're investigating it so that we have full knowledge and understanding of it. Now, what we do to remediate will very much depend on what we end up putting there. So if we're going to be putting buildings with basements, which we don't intend on doing right now, and we have to dig down 15 feet, then we'll be doing more remediation than if we're just putting a road there. We'll do what is required or what is necessary to clean it up so that no contamination spreads to surrounding areas. But we don't necessarily want to disturb stuff that doesn't want to be disturbed unless we have to.
Ann?
When you did your budget pricing, did you anticipate any remediation?
We assumed to protect ourselves, we built a budget number for remediation, and then we layered 3 layers of contingency on top of that.
That's excellent.
Okay. So again, we're looking at you doing testing at each point. So you're making a connection at 51st Avenue, and you're making a connection at 49th Avenue. So as part of your testing, you're going to test both sides of the river for that connectivity for both sides,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
We're required. We're required to by the law.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Anything else on the environment? Okay, I'll turn it over to Steve. And Steve will
I'm going to talk about entitlements and just stay seated because I just have this one here back up. You guys know this topic well. We've talked about this quite a bit last year. But under the critical path activities, the current zoning on the ground does not allow the things that the master plan contemplates. It does not allow the master plan. So in order to facilitate and enable the development of the master plan, we wrote new zoning, and we're mapping that new zoning. That is going to City Council on the 22nd, as I mentioned earlier. Now, we've done a lot more investigation into the legal descriptions, and we've determined that some of these legal descriptions are very, very old, dating to the late 1800s. And what we've talked about is that we are only rezoning land that is owned by the city or owned by National Western. Some of these legal descriptions have reservations for railroads, have easements, they get very complicated. And so the actual zoning map, the area we're rezoning is shrinking slightly. It's still National Western owned land and land owned by the city, but it's not going to be as big as the map that we showed you initially. I'll get the map in the roundup. We just want to cover ourselves and make sure we're not.
What's the variance, you think?
I'm sorry.
What's the variance land-wise?
It's a pretty substantial reduction in land, so maybe 50% reduction in what we had initially anticipated in rezoning.
Wow.
Yeah, but we are landing the zoning, we are mapping it on land owned by the city and the National Western. We weren't rezoning the entire site anyways, right? So another critical path element is surveying the entire area. So we are very confident that it's owned and we know where the calls are and we know the land rezoning. So that's going to happen as well. We'll have to go through another map amendment to rezone the rest of the land.
So just to be clear, the reason we're reducing is that the title is kind of murky on because of the legal description. Some of these parcels. Okay.
Some go back to the 1800s.
The title is murky, meaning you don't know.
We're not quite sure who.
I'm not sure who owns it yet.
Can we homestead?
But
That's what they already did. That's why the problem's there.
Yeah, Paul's asserted his.
I'll give you an example. So there's a rock reference with an X on it. Well, where is that rock?
A rock reference with an X on it?
Yeah, and then also there's another reference in the title, and it says the land that we own in this area, and the area is massive as a reservation. We're not really sure about that. Our city surveyors are not confident.
I think that's mine.
And railroad reservations as well. I mean, there's a reservation that says 17 feet of the rail within a larger area. Well, where is that 17 feet and how long is it? So these are the things that we're dealing with. So we'll send an updated map.
That's amazing.
We're going to have it.
I don't know the acre, but it's still a substantial amount. It's the entire Coliseum site, and it's
That's amazing.
probably about 50.
So you have a team working on trying to clear this up, I assume?
We had probably, I don't know, maybe 7 surveyors trying to clear this up, and we're just going to have to resurvey it.
This is 6 months, 6 months to a year's worth.
Well, I think you should do a seance and bring back some of the originals.
Wow.
We'll try to find the rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably true. All right. I'm sorry, Armando, we can't hear you.
In this new zoning application that the city's looking at, it's going to be designated as a campus, part of the campus family as a zoning part. And I'm sure that part of that designation, you're going to incorporate some of the TOD's transportation development inside, so you get some of those zoning, transportation development, zoning benefits, if you will, as part of the campus family, being able to enhance the property, being able to make it more multi-use.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it allows a number of uses. It allows mixing of those uses in single structures. It allows residential. It allows a lot of things in Mission Valley, or all things in Mission Valley Master Plan, which include
Because from a neighborhood perspective, I think TOD transportation development is very important for us because of the fact that, again, it allows us to have access to cruise rail, alternate mode bus, and all that stuff. So, from a neighborhood perspective, we integrate it in the campus development.
Okay.
Anything else?
I know we're out of time. I mean, I think the thing I was going to cover were 2 quick ones. So one is the program, as you recall, as part of the master planning process, one of the early activities we did was create a program which defines the, you take uses, right? And we need to then define those into a program that create buildings, start to define spaces, adjacency to those spaces. And we've not done anything with that document because, quite frankly, we took it as far as we needed to advance the master plan. But the goal will be, when we're successful here in November, we will start to kind of dust that document off and start to move into some detailed design work. And we'll start back with the master planning document, the program document, and start to roll that piece in. So I'll give you one example, just to, up until a week ago, we didn't have any way to fund the CSU buildings, right?
Right.
So now with the acceleration and investment from the state in getting the CSU buildings, we'll start to roll in. They'll have to start to build a program for their water resource center, which could be an early phased development, right? So that's an example of something we'll have to start to work on and roll that into how it fits into our larger master plan development effort. And you guys will be actively involved in that work when we get it started.
And so the subcommittee that is working on kind of like how the program will be, how the campus will be activated seems to be an important element in that as well.
Correct. That will start to inform right uses, because you can take flexibility too far, and so I think that group will start to roll in experts and others as we think about how you create a flexible enough platform, but at the same time not make it so flexible operationally it becomes you can't no longer function. Right. So those are the kinds of things that group. But we'll dust that off after the election. The second is parking study. We are under. We've hired a firm to help us write the scope for what will be a more comprehensive parking study, and we'll be doing that in collaboration with the National Western and Arts and Venues to really start to hone in on the requirements for the parking on the campus itself, as well as the benefits of connecting the various TOD stations and how we really leverage the investments that have been made. So that work, the firm's been hired. We're going to start to develop a more formal scope over the course of this summer, and then we'll probably get that bundled into an RFP document in the fall, and issue that in the fall, and then get that. Yeah, and get that. I mean, there's a sense of urgency for all of us. That's a really important discussion we have to have around the parking. So getting that firm on board to help us really start to think through the nuts and bolts of parking. And that'll be a year-long exercise, because that not only will talk about the full build-out, but also start to think about the phasing, right? Because there'll have to be different parking plans as we start construction. So they'll start to help us inform us about that as well.
Drew?
Oh, question, Kelly. So maybe it's hard to answer this without the study, but you don't anticipate a larger area needed for parking than what's already in the master plan?
I mean, we're going to focus on what the campus as it's defined now in terms of the land mass we currently have.
Yeah. Try to work with...
Right, because it's a function of structured parking, right?
Right.
We've already identified a variety of places where structured parking might go, but we gave a range of what those structures might
It's
be.
flexible. So.
Right. We still need a fair amount of surface parking because we're moving big vehicles around these buildings. There's some unique needs of an event like the stock show that require the balancing of open surface, and then thinking through the spectrum of events and the needs for those various events from a parking perspective. So that's what this study will help us really start to hone in on what the real take that range that's like this right now and start to get that range down here, and probably some specific recommendations around how big those structures should be. Those are my two things.
So just, this would be to Steve, I think. Just to be totally clear, if possible, what the city council will be voting on then, which is different, apparently, from the map that's been approved up to this point. Can we still have it that the aspirational vision of the map in total is as originally proposed, so that the commitment to try and rezone the things that have to be taken out temporarily, and then acquisitions done can be back into the original footprint?
Absolutely. I mean, the intent is to do multiple map amendments as we implement the master, as we build out. And so this is just the first one.
Gotcha.
And it's a little bit smaller than we first anticipated.
Okay, 50% is done a little smaller,
Yeah.
just for the record.
50% smaller than we first anticipated.
No offense. No offense, Steve, but...
If anybody wants to join me this weekend, I will be looking for the rock.
I tested a friend of mine in the School of Mines, and they're making a place.
Can I rephrase it a different way? Is it what's happening that your city attorneys, we tend to be overly conservative when it comes to property acquisition, property rezonings, because you can't zone somebody's property without somebody's permission, are nervous that the surveys do not clearly tell them who owns the property, and they're worried that there may be some Terrence Carroll person or whatever?
Yeah, you gotta see it to believe it. There are properties where the map might show a square here, and the legal description describes a property over here, over here, and over here. It's pretty awesome, actually. It's really cool.
I'd love to see those same issues.
Okay, but I just want to make sure that it's really more I understand that, but
No, but it's very functional. I mean, we literally can't.
it's not that we are seeing some surprises and we're not going to be able to rezone these properties down the road.
Right.
It's just that you guys are trying to do all of your button down the hatchets.
And this is not uncommon for old parts of the city, right? This happens all the time, right? I mean, when we did Proper City, we certainly uncovered some things, and that doesn't go back nearly as old as this, right? It's just a function of collecting all the information, verifying that it's accurate, and overlaying it on.
And the resolution is survey. You know, we were hoping the goal, the rezoning works by using a legal description of the property. Unfortunately, we don't have viable legal descriptions of a lot of the properties, so we have to actually go out and survey them and create that legal. And we have to have survey on board, and it has to be part of a larger program of survey that will undertake the entire campus.
Okay. Well, I think as we get it all cleared up and after it's all done, each member of the committee ought to get a original copy of one of the surveys so they can frame it as a historical piece or something like that.
I mean, we're hoping to tell a story about some of the...
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Well,
Okay.
Paul should be careful, because I could lay claim to some of that ground under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo after the Mexican-American War, so be forewarned.
All right, guys, we need to keep moving.
Okay, so very quickly, regeneration sustainability. So it's described in very broad detail in Appendix D of the master plan, but we have what I would say very high aspirations for the sustainability, the goals for sustainability on the campus. The goal is net zero energy, waste, and water, which means we only use what we produce, essentially, on the campus. And so we started a process now of figuring out how to do that. With a 270-acre campus, it's not going to be easy, and it's something that we'll have to do over the next 15 to 20 years. But we started now, we're doing what I call a listening tour, where we're going and meeting with every consultant and every professor and every water engineer that we possibly can to learn what type of technologies are out there to help us achieve this process, achieve those goals. And we're starting to develop a strategy, and we'll be engaging consultants to help us down the path towards net zero water, waste, and energy, which is it's a very heady goal, but it's extraordinarily exciting because it's not something that exists very often in this country. Colorado, I think, has one on a small scale in Fort Collins, which is a net zero district, and our goal is to do that with National Western, which will hopefully make it a showcase for the country. So it's very exciting. Yes,
David?
Yes, sir.
Now, with CSU coming on board and putting in a campus, is there going to be student housing?
We've been back and forth on that. There was part of CSU's original program was to have student housing, and then they pulled the student housing out, and now they're contemplating bringing it back in. So it's still
Specific to the vets.
Yeah, specific to the veterinary school, to the Equine Sports Medicine Clinic at the north end of the campus, with the goal of it potentially having actual rotations, veterinary rotations through the campus and providing housing for those vets. A lot of it will also depend on what they plan on doing in their primary building on the campus, the CSU Center on the Colorado Commons, which right now is very broadly defined as a 140,000 square foot building with classrooms and lecture halls and office spaces and event spaces. But they haven't really fully decided what they're going to do there, and that will drive their decision as well about whether they have additional student housing beyond just the vet.
Well, there wouldn't be enough room on this campus for student housing.
Yeah, whether it would be on the campus or whether it's something that they would pursue in the adjacent neighborhoods, they haven't decided.
Ann?
So have you reached out to the National Renewable Energy Lab?
So they are very excited.
Okay.
We met with them, we toured the campus with them 2 weeks ago. We are going to tour their facility next week
Yeah.
with them and the EPA, because the EPA funds a lot of their activities, and the EPA is really excited to fund
Yeah, they
studies.
have enormous resources
Yeah.
as far as, you know, things that they've been involved with.
Yeah, they toured, and they were so excited that they already sent us a scope of work. They said, this is what we'd like to do. Tell us if you'd let us. I mean, it's awesome. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, go ahead.
All right, the next one is the public realm study. And so as you may recall from the master plan, a lot of open space is planned. Parks, plazas, green space along the river. And so the public realm study is intended to develop a cohesive set of goals and standards for these parks. It's basically the spaces in between the buildings and how they interact with the buildings, how they interact with each other, how we interact with the spaces, and establishing some guidelines for building these spaces. That will also inform the next bullet item, which will be the campus design standards and guidelines. And these are for the structures themselves. So we've talked a lot about zoning, kind of in a big bubble. The design standards and guidelines start to get into the building structures, how they look, how they're designed, even into things like materials and the character of these buildings. And so that's the brief overview where I'm just putting ink to paper and establishing an RFP, like writing an RFP, because we are going to hire some help for both of these studies. We do intend to kick off, procure through the rest of this year and kick off early 2016. So when I have the RFP written in a draft form, I'll share it and we can talk about it and what's involved.
So an RFP to hire a consultant, do you mean like a landscape architect firm that specializes in public realm?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Cool. And then,
Especially around large entertainment
right,
venues.
kind of like at Union Station, the whole process they went through. So when you refer to public space here, is it truly public space or is it privately owned public space? How's that going to be?
Yeah, that's something that needs to be determined. Likely privately owned, but publicly accessible.
Mm-hmm. That have the ability to have its own private rules associated with it, as opposed to being like public.
Correct.
As opposed to being
Which would be, again, part of the creating the campus.
Right.
And the uses of the campus
Right.
for entertainment related.
Exactly.
Educational events, those things that are specific to the vision of the campus.
Okay. Kelly, do you want to talk briefly, because we're running out of time, guys, on drafting and implementation committees?
Sure. Actually, I'll just do a handout, so let me give this has been one really fun to do. I spent, since we talked about this last time, a fair amount of time kind of being a student again in some respects, and looking at the country, across the country, about what's going on in other parts of the country around neighborhood engagement of neighborhood plans. And so this is a culmination of that, and I'm all about keeping things simple, so this starts out like a structure. But again, we'd have a Globeville Implementation Committee and a Larry Swansea Implementation Committee, 9 to 11 members roughly. If they start to get over 11 members, it gets too big. The majority of the members would be resident property owners. And then I had a meeting with Councilman Ortega and Councilman Montero and Councilman Brooks. They provided some feedback. They thought it would be a good idea to have a nonprofit or nonprofits is also part of it, because there's obviously we have a handful of nonprofits that are doing work. So that's identified in terms of kind of the makeup. I'd basically lay out the structure. But my hope would be is over the next 30 days we get these committees, we get folks identified, we get them sat. Again, the NWCAC will help support, staff those committees. We'll work closely with community plan development, public, all the key agencies. And the goal is to take those master plans, those approved, adopted master plans, neighborhood plans, and then begin to work with those committees to say, how do you translate a framework plan, just like the master plan for the National Western, and convert those into work plans to get the stuff done that you guys all want. That's the goal. Okay? So these are for feedback. I'll send out an electronic version that can go out in the roundup. My hope is to get them stood up. In the interim, because I know there will be concerns about the budget, is Todd Winskowski and I will work with Vern and others to sit down and get feedback on the budget stuff now in advance of getting these committees stood up so that we can make sure, because we already have thought kind of through, based on feedback we've gotten, requests we would make, but we want to compare notes and make sure that we're getting those things on the 16 budget and not wait for these committees necessarily. But going forward, the committees would provide that feedback and an ongoing accountability structure to make sure we're delivering on the plans. Related to that, which I will have after I meet with the city attorney's office, is the community benefits MOU. Again, I did a lot of homework. I looked around the country. I've taken what you guys already gave me. I've embedded that into the document. I'm sitting down with the city attorney's office this next week. And once I meet with them, I will push that document back out to you.
So you think that'll be available for a June meeting?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Great.
And that document really references how we, by its very nature, a memorandum of understanding about community benefits, right? How do you take the accrued investments that are happening and making sure that the neighborhoods are receiving the benefits as defined by the various plans? And so again, I looked at a variety of options from around the country and pulled from different ones from around the country. So we'll see. I mean, I have no pride in authorship. So you guys get them, mark them up, and then we'll get that in place as well.
I think it might be helpful if you all send back comments and we'll forward to, and NWCC will forward them on to you.
Yeah.
Great.
But I'm excited. I'm really excited to get both the implementation. I mean, the implementation committees really are the anchors, right? Those committees become the stewards of owning your plans and being direct partners with the city to implement those plans.
Okay.
I think, Kelly, I wonder how some other people that have been involved in these committees like Vern feel, but I think this goes a long way toward really trying to
We're all looking at you,
address
Vern.
the concerns.
What do you think, Vern?
I don't know, maybe Vern.
Enlighten us, Vern.
Well,
Hear the whole question.
Don't you think, I mean, this could be a way to really cement the...
Well, I would agree. I mean, we've had numerous meetings and conversations about this. I mean, Kelly is definitely held to committee to what he's committed to do. And, the whole thing is about being able to look us over and see how it fits in with what everybody wants to get here. And, I agree. It does go a long way. And,
It kind of puts an onus on us, too.
Right. And so, as we kind of go, we keep moving forward. I'm excited about it, and we'll just kind of keep continuing to go. I'm anxious to see the MOU and see what we got.
It's been a little harder to write that. And not so much hard, but it's how do you get the intent in the document, right?
Well, yeah, I've looked at a few of those MOUs too, and they can get pretty.
Well, there's one I looked at was a 100-page document. It's like,
Yeah, it's intense.
Yeah. So this is I'm all about simple, right? If it can't fit on front and back, it's too much.
Well,
Okay.
I don't want to throw cold water.
Okay.
Excuse the pun. I don't want to rub your hair the wrong way. But
I don't have much hair.
I've got some concerns about some of the stuff here, but as I said before, in spirit of good communication, I think we can work this out. But there's some things in it that I know some people have some very deep and strong feelings. So we'll work that out.
That's great. No, I mean, this is really intended for you to react to it. So.
Good.
Okay.
I think that's why it says draft.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's move on to the other part of the agenda, which deals with the possible or potential lodgers tax election. Kelly, Rachel, Carrie are all here, and they will, I think it's fair to say that the presentation that you're seeing tonight is a presentation that will be given to City Council on, I need a nod from Carrie or from Rachel or from, this is the presentation that will be given to City Council next Tuesday, which they haven't seen, at committee. The committee meeting is at 10:30.
What day?
Tuesday, June 2nd. There has been a bill that's been filed, a draft bill request that has been filed already in front of the City Council, which is leading to the committee meeting next Tuesday. We'll talk about schedule later about all of this, but with that, I believe it's Kelly first, then Rachel, then Carrie, correct? That's the order. And I think, Kelly, given this group, you could probably go through your slides pretty quickly. If you want to sit at the table, Alan, you can. To see it.
It's a big flag.
It's thinking.
So yeah, as Marie said, there's some slides on here you've seen. I mean, you've seen, how many times have we all seen the master plan picture, right? So it's,
This is extra.
that's it.
Can you say what an interceptor is while that's coming up? Oh, I didn't recognize the term. Somebody was doing a report. You know what that is?
I think it's.
Yeah, it's the sewage pipe, the Delgany interceptor. I think the interceptor is actually one specific point on the pipe, but we always just call it the whole thing the Delgany interceptor, but really it's the two 72-inch pipes that run through things.
Okay, unless someone says stop, I'll hit the high point. You'll see it. All right. So this is the same presentation we've been given to council members and folks. So you're seeing the same thing council's going to. So we're going to modify this a little bit for council, but this is basically the same presentation. All right. So we start off talking about really essentially the last 2 years and the activity that has accrued between ourselves, the city, our partners at Visit Denver, the National Western. To get to a place where we're talking about these projects collectively, the investment, the power of the investment in tourism-related facilities, and a bunch of the activity that's happened between the National Western and the Visit Denver folks to get to a place where we can refer something to the voters. That's what this is. Everyone is familiar with this, so we talk about here's the ultimate build out of the campus, 270 acres. The next, and you'll hear Rachel talk about this too, you'll recall that before we even started the master planning process, we hired a company called Strategic Advisory Group to do a market-based feasibility study to look at how do we make sure Denver remains competitive, how do we make sure the stock show in this place called the National Western Center remains competitive for the next 50 years, right? It starts to talk about the brand, people's opinions of the event and of the space. And that helped frame the master planning process we went through. But at the end of the day, this is about creating a huge tourism economic driver, continuing to build on what the convention center does, builds on what the National Western's done today, and really creates this. Over 30 years, we're talking about just under $6 billion in net new revenue on the tourism side for this venue, right? The thing that I will point out that's different that you've heard me talk about a little bit is as we start to really get into the agribusiness and agri-science opportunities and partners that may accrue. We're talking about 6,000 direct jobs and 10,000 indirect jobs in and around this campus around agribusiness and agri-science. And we talk, Senator Sonnenberg talks about the Silicon Valley of ag and really positioning Colorado in a powerful way to solve some of the world's biggest food issues. This campus acts as the kind of cauldron or beacon for those conversations. So due diligence, you guys are living this with us, right? Even though when the plan was adopted, we are continuing to do work so that we can move this project forward, all right? Same goal with the neighborhood plan. So all the things that Steve and Eric and I have described essentially is what we're doing here. What we're going to build, so a reminder, phase 1 and 2, which are defined in the RTA application, the Regional Tourism Act application, again, are listed here or highlighted. And I'm going to actually go to the map because it shows you more graphically. So again, it's building the new bridges, connections to Washington Street, the new yards. Once we get the new yards built and the rail consolidated, then we go to phase 2, build the livestock center and the equestrian center, the equine sports medicine facility, make the improvements on Bryant Boulevard, get the land acquired, remediate the site, prepare it for the full development. So this is a lot of work over the course of probably 4 to 6 years, And then once we get the site ready for development, then you just motor through, right? You just keep going. But the hardest work is really these first 2 phases. Senate Bill 1344, Governor signed the bill last week to make it a law. Makes the state a partner up to $250 million in accelerating the development of the CSU facilities on the campus. The trigger that everybody should understand is that we have to pass this election in order to have access to this money. So the state gives us the money when we're successful at the ballot. And it taps into the, obviously, the ag industry, the $42 billion a year ag industry.
This is a city, just an election, right?
Correct, yeah, city of Denver only. But in the law, in the act, it talks about to have access to this money, we have to successfully pass the election.
To have access to the state money. They made it contingent on a successful vote in Denver.
And it actually helped bring along a lot of legislators to it. Governance, so we've talked about governance, so there's 2 slides here, one around interim. So the Executive Oversight Committee, again with the 2 subcommittees, I'm chairing the Executive Oversight Committee. And then the long-term governance, the idea is after spending a year looking at different models, is an authority-type model. The authority board would be appointed by the mayor to advance the campus vision. The Western Stock Show Association and CSU would become anchor tenants on the campus. The city would own all the land and the buildings for which we're investing, right? We would become the landowner. The state will own the buildings they build on the campus. The authority will comply with all open records and open meeting requirements, and that we would follow all city procurement and social ordinances. Okay? And there's going to be a ton of detail that emerges, but these are the kind of the high-level framework components. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rachel.
What is that WSSA space?
Western Stock Show Association.
That's actually the legal name
That's the
of
parent
the National
of
Western.
the 501c3 or whatever it's not.
It's a C3.
C3.
So National Western is
It is. Exactly.
Good evening. I haven't met all of you, but I'm Rachel Bendick. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Services at Visit Denver, the Convention and Visitors Bureau. My job at this point is to get you passionate and engaged about the convention center, because clearly you are very passionate and engaged about this part of the deal. So please ask questions. This is something I eat, sleep, and breathe every day, but we're really excited about this venture. And when we did the feasibility study with SAG, it was exciting because typically in our world, you do that and you really just focus on a convention center. And we really liked that what the mayor did is he said, let's look at these other city assets because A, they're close to one another, and B, how do they complement one another? Because what you don't want to have happen is sort of the idea of robbing Peter to pay Paul. So we're really excited that they took a holistic look at this. For us, with the feasibility study, they really did a deep dive into our business. So they spoke with over 120 of our clients. These are people that have used the convention center, are currently using the convention center, have committed to using the convention center in the future. To give you an idea of our world, we have business right now contracted into 2031 at that convention center. So they talked to a large number of our constituents, and they also talked to shows that you may be familiar with. We call them public shows, so people that run the garden and home show, the people that run the auto show. So they really talked to all the key stakeholders. And the good news was they came back and said, you know what? People really like this building. It is not broken. It's laid out really well. It's functional. It's beautiful. It's in the heart of downtown. It's a walkable package. So really for us, it became this idea of taking it from good to great. So it wasn't broken. So how do we continue to fine tune and tweak it so that it can continue to be an economic engine? The other thing they found, and in my world, the competition is fierce. And what I'll say about that is major cities right now are building new convention centers. They're expanding their convention centers. They're building new hotels. We just had an industry newsletter come out, and there's a brand new convention center opening in 2016 in Oman. And they are going to be going after our business. So not only do we compete with other cities across the United States, we compete with the world right now at the Colorado Convention Center. they looked into our database and our books, and they revealed some opportunities. So there's some business that we've lost over the years that we think we can mitigate and win in the future. So there's an opportunity for us to bring more business into the building. And then we didn't ask them to really look at the hotel piece, but they did. And what they found was, has anyone been down to the convention center recently? Just show of hands. Yes, Paul. Good. So you sort of understand that, you know, the layout, where you've got the center, you've got the hotels around it, and really what SAG came back and told us was the city just should be mindful of the limited land opportunities that exist around the convention center if there were to be interest in further hotel development. So that was another takeaway. And then they also tried to look and say, what's the risk if Denver does nothing? What if we just keep the convention center exactly like it is, and we just say, hey, this is good, we're doing really good, what does status quo look like? So what they came back with was really 4 recommendations. One was to add meeting space. So a new ballroom, new meeting rooms that we would envision would happen. They would go on top of our convention center. So we would be building up. And the idea behind this is that you start to take advantage of those spectacular city views and the views of the Rocky Mountains. Our clients used to tell us, we want a blank slate. We want to create the vision when we come into this building. We want it to be our colors, our look, our feel. We don't want windows. And now what our clients are saying is, when I'm in the Colorado Convention Center, I want to know I'm in Denver. So I want your culture to be reflected. I want to see and experience what's iconic about your city. And certainly so much of what's iconic about our city are those beautiful Rocky Mountains in our backyard. So we're looking at adding this space on top of the convention center. They also came back and said, take your existing facility and make better use of, kind of create natural networking areas. If you walk through that convention center when a meeting is happening, you'll see people just gather together. And that's a really big driver for someone who decides to attend a meeting. Yes, they want to receive their continuing education credits, but they also want to network with their peers. So how do you create spaces? When we open the building, you would come in during a major convention and you would see people sitting all over the floor. And then we realized, okay, we need to have tables so people can sit places, because we had this beautiful building, but it wasn't as functional as it needed to be. So the networking piece is really looking at making the existing building even more functional and really lending itself to those areas. And the specialty space, that really talks about, again, taking advantage of the views of the Rocky Mountains and then knowing that you're in Denver. So we talk about things like, what if we put a climbing wall in the convention center? And what if you were at a reception and we have people just climbing, not people that would probably sue us if they found hurt themselves, but professional people climbing on a climbing wall, and you create a reception environment. It would be something that would be really indicative of Denver. And the example we use is Nashville just opened a brand new convention center. And I will tell you, if I put you in a plane and blindfolded you and put you in that building, you would walk around for, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes, and you would say, I am in Nashville, Tennessee. So how do we create that with our building? And then technology. This is a tricky one to stay on top of. When you're talking about something in 2015 that may open in 2018, let's say, and then be viable and sustainable for another 10 or 15 years, it's how do you keep up and how do you stay ahead? How do we remain on the cutting edge of technology? The people that are showing up at our meetings right now, they have 3 devices. They have an iPhone, they have an iPad, they have a laptop, they have multiple phones sometimes. So what you're dealing with is trying to really stay ahead of that and making sure that your building can handle the type of people that are going to be coming in and utilizing it. The good news is our convention center can handle probably about 90% of the business that exists out there in our markets. And what that 10% is, we kind of say to ourselves, we're going to let Las Vegas, Orlando, and Chicago fight over that. It's the huge, huge business. It's the business that we would have to literally double what we have, and that would keep me up at night because I can't double that building and keep it full 365 days a year. So we're not going to worry about that. What we want to do is we want the opportunity to bring in more mid-size and small groups. So you sort of start stacking business on top of business. So when the American Academy of Family Physicians is meeting in that city, you also might have the equine practitioner group meeting in that facility. So you kind of create this constant pressure with your hotels and lots of groups going through the building at the same time versus just having one big one in. When they dug into our business, they really found that over the last couple of years that they analyzed, we had 50 opportunities where we had what we would call an exhibit hall. So we have 6 exhibit halls at the convention center. And we had 50 cases where we had 1 exhibit hall available, but we didn't have the supporting meeting space. So if someone wanted to do a trade show, they couldn't put their educational sessions anywhere, so we were losing that business. And then they also looked and they said, of the business that you lost, so we bid on this, we went after it, and they said, sorry, we're going to go somewhere else. They really found that 50 of those events, out of the 300 and some we lost in a 2-year period, we could have accommodated those with this additional meeting space. So the assumptions that they make, and again, much like you'll hear from Carrie on the finance part of things, these are really conservative assumptions, because I'd love to tell you that of those 50 groups, we're going to book every one of them if we get this space. But we won't. We will still certainly lose some to the competition, as the competition will lose business to us. So when you look at those, they say you would book probably 25 new events. And if you look at the spending on that, and this is industry standard spending. So again, some groups might have a higher spend, some groups might have a lower spend. We find this to be the average from all the research and the studies that we do on an annual basis. If you booked 25 new events, you're really looking at another almost $50 million in direct spending that would come into the city. If you extrapolate that out over 30 years, you're looking at $2.1 billion. If you really focus in on hotel sales and local taxes, you're looking at $3.4 million of new business coming in, and again, extrapolating that out to roughly another $150 million. And then you look at opportunity cost. So there's 2 ways to look at this. There's the what if you do nothing scenario. So they said, okay, that's really hard to determine. Let's just say you lose 10%, just 10%. That equates to $50 million, $40 million of spending in a year. And then they looked and said, if you build this new space, what happens is we become sort of, we're the city out there selling the dream. So we get out into the marketplace and we say, Denver's building a new 50,000 square foot ballroom that has spectacular views of the Rocky Mountains in the city, and there's an outdoor patio space, and they've got these great networking areas and this awesome technology in the building. They believe that what happens is those groups sit in a boardroom and they say, you know what, let's go to Denver for 2020 because they've got this new space, we can do a great event there, it's really going to be exciting. So we start to then win that business, much like sometimes we lose to the cities like Nashville that are out there saying, hey, we're the new kid on the block, look at all the shiny new stuff we have in our city. So if you look and you say, if we book another 10% more of the larger business, again, you see another positive impact of about $50 million coming into the city. When we talk about competition, this is the stuff that keeps me up at night, but everybody's doing something. One example I'll point out on this slide is Seattle is expanding their convention center. Their number is $1.3 billion. Our convention center, to make these enhancements and make a huge difference, we're looking at $100 million roughly. So again, a much smaller number to make a bigger impact, but again, we're not broken, but we want to continue to sort of feed this engine so that it continues to bring the money that we needed to into the city. We're really excited about this relationship because when they opened the Anschutz Medical Campus, we realized out there we had a huge opportunity. And what we do is we leverage the brain power in the business that's out there, and we meet with their executives because those executives are sitting on boards for national associations that bring big meetings to cities. And we told them, hey, you need to think about Denver. Like, we have a great convention package, and we have 2 success stories just happening this year because of that relationship. One of them was a meeting called the Association for Research in Vision and Ophthalmology. We had 11,000 people come to our city in April. 50% of those were international attendees, and it was a direct result of that relationship with Anschutz. We have 15,000 people coming in over Labor Day weekend with the International Association for the Study of Lung Cancer. Again, a direct result of that relationship. We see this agri-science, this agribusiness out here as an awesome way to leverage that, and it becomes a selling tool for us. People will want to come. We work with the American Veterinary Medical Association. We work with the American Hospital Association. We work with the equine practitioners. Now they have this opportunity to do on-site events here, to do tours here, and then we have all this brain power here that we're going to go and meet with and say, hey, when you sit on that board, to talk about Denver and put Denver on the map so that we can work to sell it and bring all those people here. We sort of joke that we're the clean industry. What we want to do is we want to bring people here, we want them to spend their money, and we want them to go home. So with that, I'm going to turn it to the really sexy part of the presentation, which is the money. Unless you have questions for me.
Any questions for Rachel at this point? If not, we can do it at the end, too.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. had a chance to meet everyone here. I think I've been in events with you, but haven't had a chance to meet everyone. So I'm Carrie Kennedy, and I'm the CFO for the city, and it's a great privilege for me to be here tonight. I hear a lot about the work you all do, and I get a lot of input from your committee, but I haven't had a chance to be here. So it's a great privilege to be here, and a real honor to work on this project. And I just want to thank you all. You've given so much time, and I'm looking at Paul as well, but so much of your time, so much of your energy, so much of your thought into making this vision get really, really close to becoming a reality. And I just want to say, I wouldn't be here, none of us would be here without the work that you've been doing and you're continuing to do. So I just thank you very much. I know the mayor is thanked you, but I wanted to take the opportunity to thank you as well. So you all are familiar with the cost of the project. I thought I would just take you through the source of funds that are going to support the project and answer any questions. So you've seen the number, $856 million. That's the cost of the first 2 phases of the project that Kelly talked about. The western edge along the river, the middle section that includes the livestock center, and the equestrian center and the new livestock building. Where that money is coming from is $673 million from the city of Denver over the next 10 years, $117 million from the state of Colorado through the Regional Tourism Act, $16 million from CSU to build out their equine veterinary medicine center that will be part of the equestrian building. In addition to that, is $250 million from the state of Colorado to support CSU coming onto the campus. That's not on this slide. Just this piece of CSU. And then $50 million in cash contribution from the National Western Stock Show Association. So how does the city of Denver come up with $673 million over the next 10 years? The opportunity that we have as a city to be able to do a project of this magnitude is that the debt on the convention center is being paid off. That's really where the opportunity comes. And the reason these 2 projects are packaged together, the National Western Center campus redevelopment as well as the convention center, is because there's a natural connection in the use of those spaces with various events and conferences and industries that will share space, but also the source of funds. The vast majority of funding that will go to support the National Western Center are the taxes that were put in place to build the convention center. And since that's being paid off, we have an opportunity to move forward with a new project. New investments in the convention center, as well as new investments up here at National Western. So you see there $476 million in excise tax revenue bonds. What are those? My next slide is going to go through exactly what those taxes are. We don't need any tax increase. We don't need any new taxes. All we'll do is ask the voters to leave the taxes in place that are in place today that are supporting the convention center debt that will expire, that will roll off. You'll notice that doesn't quite get us to $673 million. We have about a $190 million gap that the city will fund over the next 10 years. We're being very conservative on the 476. I think we actually will be able to get more out of those tourism taxes than that, probably in the neighborhood of 500, 530 million. Still leaves us a gap as a city. So we'll be looking at land and asset sales over the next 10 years, just in the regular course of business. The city turns over a lot of properties. On-site revenues that will be generated here that will be able to contribute to this capital stack. Our wastewater funds, there are some wastewater components to this project, and then federal funds. You've heard a lot of conversation here about perhaps the federal government participating, especially on the environmental remediation and the work along the river. We think there are real opportunities to bring federal dollars in to support the project, and we'll be dedicating staff specifically to go after those federal dollars. All right, what taxes are we talking about? So they're often called the visitor taxes or the tourist taxes. You have the hotel checkout tax, also known as the lodger's tax, as well as the short-term car rental tax. So these are taxes people pay when they stay in a hotel. They're taxes people pay when they get off the airport, leave the airport, rent a car, and use it for their vacation here in Colorado. So we wanted to show you the total taxes that the city of Denver imposes on these activities. For hotels, the total tax somebody pays when they check out is 14.75%. And you can see just a sliver of that is right now dedicated to the convention center debt. 3% was the financing for the original construction of the convention center. And an additional 1.75% was added on to expand the convention center. That was voted on in 1999 by Denver voters for the first expansion of the convention center. The rest of the hotel tax, lodger's tax, is dedicated to, you see the list here, the city's capital improvements, Visit Denver, RTD, SCFD, and then the state of Colorado with their 2.9%. That's how you add up to the 14.75%. On the car rental tax, the total tax on short-term car rentals is 11.25%. And you see up there at the top that same slice. In this case, it's 2% was dedicated to the original convention center bonds, 1.75% to the expansion. So all of these taxes are permanent. They are in place, they exist in perpetuity, except the 1.75. That piece will expire when the convention center debt is paid off. So the 3% is permanent, the 2% to the convention center is permanent, but the 1.75, that expansion, rolls off. So the mayor's proposal, and what you'll see on the ballot in November, assuming council approves it, is requesting of voters to keep that 1.75% tax in place. We are right now forecasting that the convention center debt will be retired in 2023. That's still a ways away, 7 or 8 years. So you may ask, why do we have to ask voters to keep a tax in place that's not going to expire until 2023? Because with only 8 years, we can't bond against 8 years of revenue. That tax needs to be in place 30 years in order for us to bond against it. Does that make sense? Okay. This just gives you a visual graphic of what we just covered. You see here all of the convention center taxes currently in place today. Total collections are $71 million. And you see auto rental, food and beverage, a very small portion of the food and beverage tax is pledged to the convention center. And then the big slice over there is the lodger's tax. So here's the proposal going forward that we'll submit to the voters. Couple assumptions. First one is no tax rate increase, no new tax. It just leaves in place what's there today. The second assumption is that we're not going to leverage all of this tax revenue. We're going to leave some to pay for maintenance at the facilities. $2 to $10 million to growing to $10 million over the next decade that will go to provide for annual capital maintenance at the convention center as well as up here at the National Western Center, so that we're permanently dedicating funds every year to do capital maintenance to keep, once we build this beautiful facility, to keep it in good repair. The third assumption up there is that we're not going to use any of the city's general obligation bonding capacity for this project. And this is important because the city has a lot of other needs. a lot of other infrastructure needs. Rec centers and fire stations and libraries, neighborhood amenities all over the city. And we want to preserve our general obligation bonding capacity for those core city projects. And this project will be using tourism-related taxes to support it because, as Kelly and Rachel pointed out, it's going to bring a lot of new visitors to the city, to this site, that can support the cost of the project. Okay? Down on the table is the schedule for the bonds. We're not going to issue $476 or $560 million all at once. We're going to phase it in over time. So on the left is the convention center. You'll see total par amount of $105 million. That gets you about $104 million in revenues for projects. That can go as early as 2016, assuming voter approval. And then also in 2015, or it'll probably more likely be 2016, just timing to get into the market, we'll be able to generate $140 million in par for the National Western Center. Then in 2018, another $100 million. In 2020, another $290 million. And for a total of $530 million. So you'll see, when you add it all up, that's $630 million over this period of time to support these two projects. It's about $475 to $500 million for the National Western Center and another $100 million for the Convention Center. Down at the very bottom, authorized par, that's the number you're going to see in the ballot question. $778 million. And that number is bigger because it will include authorization for us to issue bonds not just against the tourism taxes, but also against the state RTA funds. So assuming we're awarded the RTA, that revenue will come in each year. This gives us the ability to borrow against it. Voter authorized debt of $778 million. Okay. This is a visual graphic of how the debt is structured. And you know, I just want to point out, I wish Lupe were here. The city's debt manager, who manages the entire profile of the City of Denver's debt portfolio, as well as Denver International Airport's debt portfolio, grew up in Gloveville. And she went to school here, and she's been working on this project. This is her work. I wish she were here because she is wonderful, and I think it's just an absolute amazing opportunity for her to manage the city's debt portfolio, but to be able to support through this debt authorization this project, which is right next to where she grew up.
What's her name? What's her name again?
Guadalupe Gutierrez.
She went to Garden Place.
Garden Place? Yeah, sure. She's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person. So this is a visual image of the structure of the debt. These each year shows the amount of debt service payments that are being made right now for the convention center. And that's shown in the, I'm going to walk over here. That's what you see right here. This royal blue are the annual payments that the city is making right now using those tourist taxes to pay off the convention center. And you see in 2023, it goes away. And that gives us the ability to layer in these other colors, the green and the red and the purple, which in essence becomes the new debt that will be paid down by these existing taxes. We used very conservative assumptions. Denver is a AAA rated credit city, so we have very strong financial performance, and that enables us to access the credit markets at very low rates of interest. We've used assumptions here that interest rates are going to go up, to be conservative, but I think we'll actually have even a little bit more capacity than this. These revenues are performing very strongly right now, and historically we've been seeing 5 to 8% growth in these tourism taxes year over year. Right now we're in double digits. We don't expect that to last forever, but historically 5 to 8%. We're only assuming a 3% growth when we structure the debt this way. Yes?
Carrie, is the, are you going to bond just the 1.75% or is it the 4.75 and 3.75 for the lot, for the?
Yes, it's all of the taxes that are currently
there.
pledged.
Okay.
So the ones that were in red and the 175 that was bolded in black remain in place and are used as pledged revenues to support this debt.
Just a question, if the 3 and the 4% never, or 2 and 3 never were going to expire, what was the intention?
Tourism-related purposes.
Okay.
And once these projects are paid off, these revenues will be available to support future tourism-related purposes. So the idea is the tourists primarily pay these taxes. The money gets reinvested back into tourism-related assets that bring more visitors to the city, generate economic opportunity, and help us service the debt that builds the infrastructure. The convention center has been highly successful. So we had to take a look at how do our tax rates compare to our competitor cities to make sure we're not putting Denver at any kind of a competitive disadvantage for people who want to stay in a hotel or rent a car from a tax perspective. And you can see here with a 14.75% tax on hotel rooms, we compared ourselves to about a dozen other cities and peer cities. We are right in the middle. We are right at the average, but we're within 1% or 2% of all these other cities. So the lowest that came in was San Diego at 12.5%. We're at 14.75%. And then you see Chicago up at 16.4%. So they're all within a couple percentage points. We're right at the average. So we feel very comfortable that this tax structure is not disadvantaging Denver in any way. All right, the ballot language. Actually, should I read some of the new language? Where did Maria go?
No, you,
yes.
Well, the tax is supposed to expire in 23. And if they don't, when will it expire after that? Along with this project? Another.
Right now, the ballot is worded to have it be permanent.
It's going to stay permanent.
Stay. So that when this debt is paid off, you'd be able to use it to support new tourism-related investments in Denver.
Some of these figures that you're putting across here, have you put in any factors in for fluctuation of the economy?
Yes. So let me go back. When you look at this, we use very conservative underwriting. So when you look at these payments, the revenues actually come in up here. So we have more, we're going to be well over 1.75, probably well over 2 times coverage on this revenue stream. So a dip in the economy that might weaken or soften the revenues, we'll still have far more revenues coming in than we will need to make these payments. We have a lot of coverage, very conservative underwriting. Yes?
The 50 million cash that the stock show is providing, is that going to be applied directly to the policy of debt, or is that have a broader scope of application?
It will go into the project costs.
Into the project costs. So
it won't be debt, it's cash going into the project.
Into the project, okay.
So it helps fund the livestock center, helps
Okay.
fund the equestrian center,
So that
helps
helps
fund the
develop.
yard.
Helps us reduce the amount of borrowing because we have cash.
Okay, that's great.
So the ballot language, and I just want to share with everybody, this is changing.
Daily.
And Maria can talk about that. But I'll just read this, it's probably a little small for you all. Shall the city and county of Denver debt be increased by no more than $778 million with a maximum repayment cost of no more than $1.1 $1.99 billion without imposing any new tax or increasing any tax rate for the purpose of financing the following tourism-related projects: the National Western Center campus and improvements to the Colorado Convention Center, as more fully described in an ordinance adopted by City Council. And this just goes on down to say the dedication of the 1.75%, the extension and dedication of it for this purpose, and authorizing those funds to be used for tourism-related projects once the debt is paid off. The conversation we're having right now on this ballot language is, should we include more specificity on what those projects are on the ballot question? So actually putting in some bullet points that enumerate what the projects are at the National Western Center campus and enumerating what the improvements would be to the Convention Center. The trade-off is length. Once you start listing all those projects, the ballot question gets really long. But it might be helpful for voters to have that specificity.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You can't get too wordy, but they may just look at the National Western Center and think of the stock show only, and it's certainly going to be more than that.
Right.
And so that might be helpful, especially with CSU involved with it. I don't know.
Maria, do you want to address it?
Sure. I think that what we've been working through, first of all, I think it's really important for everybody who leaves the room tonight who talks about it, because a lot of people are confused about the lodger's tax, etc. There is no new tax increase, absolutely none, okay? And when they tell you that there is, there isn't, okay? We're extending taxes that already exist, and we'll get that information. I think the other thing that we thought is school bonds. If you recall, a lot of school bond campaigns at times enumerate what they're saying, and you can, unfortunately, Tabor tells us how we have to write the ballot. As David Broadwell likes to say, the first 14 words of Tabor are required. The Constitution tells you exactly how they have to be written. And so we're thinking through, and I think we'll have something, obviously by Tuesday, when it goes to City Council, that we enumerate some of the issues and all of that. It does make it a little bit of a longer question, but as you can see visually, it'll make you look at, say, oh my God, you get really informed as to what. We can't advocate on this, we can only be factual. So that's what we're working through to be able to do that.
I would just say, because there's so much going on with this part of this master plan, that is awfully vague to just say National Western Center.
Right.
There's so much going on.
If you would have seen the first question, Drew, you would. I'm not sure you would have even known what part of the city this was being built in. So we are working hard on it, because this is the world of lawyers, and they really are very sticky, because the last thing you ever want is to go to an election and then have somebody challenge you. That happened, by the way, since we ran fast tracks. That happened to us in fast tracks, and we could not spend any money for 18 months. So I think that everybody's being very cautious. So we're looking at lessons learned from other parts of the state and what they've done, and the school bond world has done this, so we are doing that. But I believe that there will be descriptive bullets that are factual that will tell you what is being voted on.
Can you make it so simple that a 6-year-old understands it?
No.
If you do, everybody gets it.
Yeah, we will. We'll have to communicate a lot and educate a lot. I mean, as you can see, because of the complexities, this is why it's really important that all of you are very up to speed on all of this and understand the question, because it can lead to a lot of.
So who can get out there and promote this? If
all of you.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
Media.
The reality of life is that we are testing and have done some research. We're hoping that by the June meeting, we'll be able to show you some of the results of that research as to where the voter thinks and what's important. And so we do have to create a private committee. Kelly and Carrie and Erica and all these guys will have to they cannot campaign during city time. They can be a resource and can explain and can be invited to speak to explain what Carrie just went through, but you can't campaign because you have to create private sources. So we're in the process of creating. Craig Hughes is here from Hilltop, and Jake Martin is here. We're starting to put together the beginnings of a campaign, and we will keep, by June, we will have a lot. This is moving rapidly, quickly. We'll be able to come brief you again. I think the election has to be an ongoing issue from now on until we get it done. But we're doing that. So that's what we're trying to do. We also have to raise funds, private funds, because no public dollars can go to this. So.
I know we're not going to work on the language tonight, but I would suggest that you add, for the purpose of financing the following tourism-related projects surrounding the epically historic Betty Crandon Drive transiting corridor.
Yeah, I think the lawyers would not like that. No offense, Betty.
Had language just like that, and they took it out.
Yeah.
Trying.
We tried to be. The convention center got very creative. Yeah, the lawyers didn't like that either.
We had everything in there.
So yeah, Betty Graham Drive would be a total draw, you know. But don't worry, Betty, we got a spot for you on TV. So anyway, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to be done in 5 short months. What questions?
Last
Yeah.
slide.
It's a
shows
timeline.
The time frame. Do you want me to go through
Yes,
this?
please.
So we filed the ordinance request through City Council. As you all know, there's going to be a turnover in City Council in July. So we are right now hoping it will be the current City Council that's been very invested in this project for a long time that will vote to refer it to the ballot. June 2nd, we will be in our first committee. This will be, for the most part, the presentation you'll see on Channel 8 that we'll present to Finance and Services Committee next week.
If you have time, please come down.
Yeah, if you have time, come to the committee hearing.
Please come down. It's public.
We have sat down and briefed members of council, so they're very familiar with this, very familiar with the financial plan because it was submitted as part of the RTA package many months ago. So there really isn't much new here. It'll be in Mayor Council June 14th. We'll file the bill 2 days later. And then first reading Monday night the 22nd and second reading Monday night the 29th.
And we will keep you updated on that schedule. Let me tell you the nuances. The final reading, this is how crazy it's getting when the council's changing over from one to another. On June 22nd is our final reading on the zoning. There is not a public hearing required on this ordinance, but council may ask for a public hearing on this. If there is a public hearing, it can either be done on first or second reading, which we talked about today. The reason being that on June 29th, there's a series of public hearings, a couple of very controversial rezonings, and if council asks for a public hearing on this, we can't go ahead of rezonings. Rezonings have to go first. So we don't want to have this hearing at midnight, right? So that's what we're working through. So it's a work in progress, so we will keep you very informed.
Will we be able to get this through around the slideshow, or is there?
Yeah, can we?
Slides that are.
Yes. No, I don't think there's anything. I think out of courtesy, I'd like to wait until, can we send it on Tuesday after council meeting?
As long as everybody writes down what the June 2nd thing is.
Right, we
So
will.
it's Tuesday is June 2nd.
It's Tuesday is June 2nd. It's at 10:30 in the morning. John?
Who's going to head up the campaign?
CRL.
Yeah. But it's going to be a big team. It's not just us. We're just trying to put all the structural stuff in place.
The zoo is donating some benefits.
Yes. It's a big effort. We want to create a big citizens committee. We want to create all of that. We're just putting together the infrastructure to run a campaign. Like, we have to raise a lot of moolah.
Well, we don't have a lot of moolah, but we do.
We have
votes.
manpower. You
We
do.
have votes.
And you have manpower.
Yeah, we do.
Shoe leather.
Shoe leather. This is going to be a very, I mean, Craig, is that a fair statement? This is going to be a very, in the outreach education campaign, and we're going to need all of you guys to be able to do that. So, volunteer for.
I think a couple things to think about. One is we'll start a circuit speakers bureau, but
Right.
We're going to want people from the community talking about this, not only here but outside, other neighborhood organizations, things like that. The second is we're going to start hiring staff when we qualify for the ballot. And we want some of that's going to work here, but also it's good to have folks who are familiar with this area go out and talk about it and be acolytes elsewhere. So think about who from this community can be in the Surrogate Speakers Bureau that we'll set up. We'll have people like Rosanta Duran in it, Jerry Sonnenberg, but also members of the CAC and other community folks. Also, anyone who might be able to work full-time from roughly, call it July through the election in the first week of November. We're going to have a pretty extensive community outreach team going on to make sure this is complicated. You guys saw the ballot language? That's not a 10-second conversation. So we're going to have a very strong outreach staff out there talking.
Well, yeah, my experience is
Which you have a lot of.
Is, let you do your work, because I have enough confidence in whoever selected you that you're able to. What we need to do is what we do best at, and that's either knocking on doors, getting out the votes, getting the word out, and we've done some tremendous things. We've elected and unelected, and personally, I'm very proud of what we have been able to accomplish in the past. But I'm well aware that it is in the past, and I look forward to, jumping into it. So get this thing going, so we can do it. But when we're ready to go, let us do what we know best, because we can get it done, right?
Right.
Dave?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
That's great. That's great. I mean, you guys are critical, you're key components to this process. So it's really important that we do that. So
We'll let you do what legal finagling you got to do to get it to us, so we can get out and get it done.
One other little piece about the legal, is this one of those that there's a pro and a con?
yes.
I've never known who writes those, and then you have a cost analysis.
And you actually don't get told who writes it. So what happens on a Tabor question is anyone can, you have to be a resident of the entity now. It used to be that Doug Bruce used to send one to every county and write his own. And you don't have to be disclosed. It can be held, it continues to be anonymous. So you get a no. Trust me, there will be somebody who will decide that they're really mad at this and will write a no, and then the city is obligated to select and print those statements and send them to every household of the city.
Is there any kind of verification that it's true?
There is no fact that the entity, the city, cannot. I do not believe you can edit. If somebody, I think you could. They have some leeway in putting some things at what you pick, but I don't think you can actually rewrite someone's comments or vet out facts.
Can you put thumbs down emoticon?
We can get rules on that. I don't actually know the rules of the city. I know them at the state. So
They're about the same.
The state's a little different though, because legislative council runs the blue book process, and that's vetted, and yeah.
And we don't have a blue book.
So we could actually write the no statement.
That's true. That's been done before.
Whoever gets
So
it
I'll
first
have
or
to
something.
know.
Okay, Susan, I didn't hear that.
I was not here tonight.
Turned off.
Yeah, no, it's not actually. Yeah, you can actually. That's been done before.
For the record, my name is Peter Groff.
Yeah. So any other questions? We'll continue having this being a ongoing discussion. Obviously, it's very important. You guys, a lot of neighborhoods across the city need to be educated, and the best way to educate them is through you guys, because you guys live here. What is it? There's 419,000 registered voters in the city and county of Denver, but we think only 130
115, 120,000
will
on
vote.
the high side.
And a lot of that vote will be an older vote, and we need to make sure that everybody understands what it's going to. Drew?
Oh, I was just going to say, Ann-Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong in saying this, but I think we were at an inter-neighborhood cooperation meeting about 3 weeks ago or something, and where they really volunteered to help us, or help in this effort.
Yeah.
It was a rather vague statement, but I think that is a sort of an umbrella organization of all registered neighborhood organizations in the city.
Yeah.
And so getting support like that, I think that's one. I don't want to go into it right now, Amy, but I think things like that is a good outreach.
So just real quickly, what that is, we did a panel at the NWCAC Meeting, zoning planning. There are resolutions in the works. I put it together with the coordinators. Drew was one of the speakers. NWCAC donated 100 color copies of that map, and we have a foundation. The next step can be a resolution going in, and so that's kind of in progress. And it's going to accelerate now that I'm back on 2 feet. So
Great.
Yeah, you would be great to help with that. But
Yeah.
I think one thing, what sold them kind of was the neighborhood component of this project. I think
that was
if
the
we
intent
had-
of the whole presentation.
We have a lot of real strong allies in INC.
Yeah.
And we have, even though we've had some differences, but they're understandable. They've always been supportive, and we in turn have been supportive. In fact, we helped them get founded originally. So we have some real strong inroads with those groups, and I feel very confident that you can explore that.
That's all very important.
Yeah.
So maybe what we need to think about is that for our next meeting, we'll do some of our business stuff, and then we'll devote a chunk of time to just talking about, so we can get you guys, brought you up to date structurally, and then you guys give us lots of input, and whoever else wants to come on to talk through election stuff would be really, really helpful. But the other thing we'd like for you to tell us and inform us is if you hear of anything or anybody who may be opposing us. That's really important. There will be opposition, don't kid yourself. So the chatter we've heard before is, lately, is this is too much money to be put in that part of the city. So just hear it out there. So
What about PETA? You heard any opposition from PETA people?
not yet, but they may. That's an issue we always have to worry about. PETA, trust me, that's an issue we always have to worry about. Paul understands that issue very well. So,
but we're actually going to an all-vegan rodeo starting in 2018.
but a lot of you guys have worked with the people who organize the Denver County Fair. All those guys, we'll talk you through all of that. Those are very important components to do this, right? Those are people who are very big into talking about agriculture and urban agriculture. We need to. CSU is very committed to helping. They've got limitations, but they have a lot of alums in the city and county of Denver, and the Museum of Nature and Science has a lot of members.
I think the older voters would love to see this neighborhood be renovated, sort of put money towards that neighborhood. I think everybody wants to see this neighborhood take off.
Another thing is, if you have no people up here who aren't registered to vote,
Yeah, let's register them.
get them registered so that the majority of the votes come from out of here.
Yeah.
Because on a small election, one neighborhood can actually swing the tide.
As soon as you work out the details here, I think maybe we're going to have to sit down and have a strategy.
We do. We will.
Get right down to it.
Absolutely. No, that's what we need to do. And they may have to be separate from these meetings.
Yeah.
Because we need more time.
Yeah.
Okay? So we've talked to some of you already, so absolutely, we need to talk through this.
And
We don't want to get ahead of the city council because this is not on the ballot yet. You guys are seeing the presentation before they're seeing the presentation.
Yeah, and we need some good refreshments.
I don't want to know.
It gets hot and thirsty out there, knocking on doors.
Got it, Zapian. Okay. All right, anything else? Because we have to talk about one more issue before we all leave, guys. So anything else on the proposed campaign issue?
Well, I had one.
Sorry, Vern.
Quisiera repartir estos volantes me lo entregaron ayer en un meeting que tuve de educación de las escuelas.
I would like to distribute these flyers that are given to me
Sure.
at the meeting.
El representante de Michael Hunt.
And Ms. Michael Hunt's representative. I would like to just.
Si me permiten ustedes.
Sí. ¿Cómo no?
Vern had it.
Okay, Vern.
Just real quick, as we're talking about getting everybody behind this, I'd like to see if there's some kind of way to involve some of the business community for the area in there. A lot of people in the business community there don't specifically live in this area, but yet I think if they can see how this can possibly benefit them, you know, the involvement there I think could be phenomenal. So I don't have any ideas at this point in time, but I think it's something to note.
No, I think that's very
Maybe
important.
to do
Plus,
that.
I was, you know, I don't know, Ann, was you going, we also need to talk through also the new property owners and new people between here and Brighton, I mean, on Brighton and
There's a
all.
lot going on in Brighton Boulevard with the redevelopment, and there's a lot of groups that are put together, so certainly I can bring this message to those groups. I'm real involved with it, and I go to them all the time.
Vern, my sense is after, maybe when, to John's point, when we have sort of a first kickoff strategy session, we need to do that and we need to start developing that. We need to turn every stone in this area
Because
to make
all
sure.
of those, you're right, Vern, all of those businesses would be happy to support this 100%,
So,
Okay.
okay, great.
And I'd suggest we find another, not me here, let's, another facility. Just keep it as clean
Do you have
as
a,
possible.
do you have a favorite
Not
bar
yet, but,
that
you
you
know,
wanna?
we'll get some strategy going.
Yeah. We got it.
We'll meet by the rock.
Keep in mind that the National Western is not, this is private, so we're okay here.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, we're okay here. And the National Western's 3C, but they could spend a certain percentage of their budget. So this is in-kind stuff from them, so we can do this. Okay? All right. Next issue. AE, you want to kick this off?
Oh, the NWCAC updates?
Updates.
Yeah, I had requested an update of the roster for us, and then I'm not quite sure, I didn't know I was going to do something like that.
All right, so I have a Terrence announcement that I forgot. He's just reminded me before you go.
Oh, you want to, oh,
Yeah, go ahead. No, you want me to make it?
yeah, it seems less.
So I want you to know that we are, see, this is, we should all give him a hand. I mean, he's been very good about doing all this and co-facilitating and showing up, but the National Western just selected Mr. Carroll as the new treasurer of the National Western Stock Show Board of Directors. So I just want you to, that's a big deal, and so it'd be good. So we have lots of power here on the National Western side.
I'm just a brother making it in the world at BMW.
Oh my God. You want me to kick it off and whatever? So,
Well, I wasn't prepared to.
okay. So let's talk about a couple of things that I think are important. We tried to update the roster just for purposes of just understanding who's around and who's not. There have been a lot of members, I think more than a handful, okay, who consistently now started not to show up. So we need to assess, number one, what their interest is and what their issue is. If there's an issue that we don't know about, if somebody's angry. Like, for example, Mickey hasn't been here for the last 3 meetings, which is unusual for Mickey. Okay.
Well, it's my understanding on Mickey's case is that he's in Washington DC and he has probably been there for the last week and a half.
Okay.
I don't know when he's coming back, but he did mention that he was going to be out.
Yeah, because he was not here at the last April meeting, so I just want to make sure if there are problems or issues, we need to figure them out. If there are people who just flat out have decided that they don't want to serve anymore or don't want to be part of it, then we need to decide what we're doing next in terms of adding people to the committee. This committee, as you see, you now have representation on the EOC, you have representation on committees that report to the EOC. This committee is real, it's live, it's dynamic, it's important. And I will echo the fact that I do think we need to start thinking through that if you're a member and you don't show up for a certain amount of times, I think, I'm sorry, 3 strikes you're out in some way. I hate to be that crass about it, but we are now getting into a very hard, this is where the committee, you guys have put an enormous amount of work. We still have a lot more work to do, but assuming we're all successful on November 3rd, the work has just begun, okay, to be able to do this. So we want to make sure that we're assessing who's going to continue to run with us all the way through this process.
So can I fill that out a little
Yep.
bit? Okay. The reason she handed this to me, I just want to was because I raised the issue and then when there was a proposed change, I was concerned about the classifications, what were put next to some of the people. that were, the RNOs were listed in the update when we weren't necessarily brought in as RNO representatives. And we have to look back and see what the mix is and everything. And we need to be aware of what we're doing in this process. And I fully support there being, something that might be 3 strikes and you're out and that kind of thing. I don't want us to get into the individuals tonight because we don't have time.
Right.
But I feel like what we need to do is bring the discussion to the table. Because when I spoke to Maria about this, and I've been, as you guys know, kind of wanting there to be some kind of a process here that defines how we make decisions and what we are. And then Maria related to me that she had conversations with people that don't necessarily want that as specific. My reaction to that, response to that, and I've thought about that, is we shouldn't be lobbying Maria or anybody else. We should be talking to each other as a group. What kind of expectations do we want in the process here, and how does that define the authorities of this group? So I just want us to really finally get to some kind of a firm process, and this is a step. And we have to be clear what the demographics are of the group, and we have to make each other accountable.
I mean, we've been approached by other people who might want to say, how do you rejoin? How do you do that? We really, now that this thing is real, very real, okay, we really need to get a little bit more structured in our process moving forward. John?
Well, I don't want to compare it to train whistles in the night, but I think possibly one approach might be that you have the listing of all the members. Just ask them if they want to continue. Somebody might be too busy, and if they want to preserve what they might feel is their vested self-interest in this group, they might want to submit someone as a sit-in for them or their representative. I don't know if you want to go that far, but I don't want this group to alienate anybody that we've shared thoughts with.
Agreed.
So I think if we give them the opportunity to say, I'd like to be on the committee, but I'm really too busy. I can't. I can accept that.
Right.
I agree that we don't want to burn any bridges, but I would also add that at this point in the process, it requires all hands on deck.
Right.
And so I don't know if we can accept a surrogate for someone if that surrogate's not going to be vested in being all hands. And so that's the conversation we have to have with folks is, are you in for the long run? Because we're now, and we're turning third base at this point. I mean, at the very least, second base. And we need everyone who's going to be here to make the push to home plate.
And historically, directly relevant to that, remember when we expanded a little bit?
Yeah, Vern
and
Ann.
Nancy, and Ann. We, at that time, did go face-to-face with people, and it doesn't matter who and how many, but I know Maria talked to certain members of this group, and this group endorsed going out there and doing exactly what you just described, John, and I myself sat face-to-face with a couple key people that, heart to heart saying, I want you to be there, can you be there, what's happening, you haven't been there. Word of honor will be there every single meeting. And there are individuals that said that didn't do that. And it doesn't make me angry, it breaks my heart, but I don't want us to be waiting things in the, there's lots of people out here that can really bring great things, and I don't want people to be just legitimizing this process by abandoning it and not bringing to the table why they chose to do so or why they are now in a different position to not, be the best people to do it. So there is a history of doing exactly that, because I do support that. This is not meant to be punitive. That's another world. This is meant to be constructive.
Right. Right. Okay.
Well, I think too, the communication has improved substantially.
Since we started taping?
Yeah. And so since that has come into play, it has helped a lot when you have missed meetings, because then you can go and you can, find out what's going on, and if you can't be here via emails or whatever, you can maybe get your points across or make comments of what needs to be done. So, I think everybody in this busy time is affected by not being always able to be here. But in myself, what I do is if I can't be here, then that's what I look for. So if I feel that there is a comment that needs to be made or some correspondence that needs to be done, I can do that without being here. At least show my way of keeping track
And then
of
we'll
what's going on.
and it gets circulated, everybody knows what you put in.
Yeah, and it works out that way.
Yeah,
So-
there's no, yeah, I agree.
And there may be people who feel that after the master plan was completed, that
It was over.
their goals were met, and that they don't really want to continue with all of the details. So, I mean, I think that's a legitimate question.
Yeah.
And they just need to be asked.
Should we set this for further discussion?
Yeah, let's do that and do that. The other thing, the only other last closing comment is because we are in fact moving to another council person. And Nola, you've been terrific, and you know you have historical perspective and you understand what's happened in the neighborhood. I've asked Councilman Brooks to see, can we have a designated staff person that we can start working with and bringing up to speed, because they haven't done that, because that continuity is really important. And going from council person to be able to do that. So I think that's also important, why you guys are quickly becoming the institutional memory, right, of this entire project, and I think it's going to be very important that we keep that and maintain that. So, okay? With that, anything else?
Well,
Vern?
I have one last thing in closing. As we've been going through this preliminary things on the project here, I have a couple questions that maybe in one of the next meetings, that what is going on with the odor issues for this area? This is something that I believe needs to be addressed. This is not going to be a very quick and easy thing to deal with. And, you know, I know of at least two, which I'm not going to get into now, areas that do cause us a lot of issues with odors in this area. And if we're going to put this kind of a project together, I think it is something that needs to be addressed and something that needs to be discussed in one of the meetings that we have.
So I think in order to do that, I think there's two. I think I know what odor you're referring to.
Well, there's a few of them.
There's a few
yeah.
of them, but it's an eclectic group of odors.
Right.
I think that we probably ought to get a combination, and we'll make sure we'll make sure we write this down. Is we probably ought to get a combination of the environmental health and excise and licensing. Yeah.
Celia's been working on the.
Right, Celia's been working on it. So I think having her do it and get the appropriate people, is that okay with you? That we
No,
do that?
that's fine. I just think it's something that we need to work on, start working on now for the future.
Which is
Vern,
in the
it's actually, it's part of our regeneration sustainability effort. It includes specifically addressing odors. It's part of our initiative.
Okay.
You know, related to overall, you know, indoor air quality and quality of life on the campus, et cetera.
Well, I just want to see that we start identifying it and then what the procedure is going to be going forward.
Transforming steep to sustainability.
John?
I just want to say a couple of things. June the 16th, 1965 was the devastating date of the devastating flood that hit Denver.
50, 60 years ago.
That resulted in the construction of a Chatfield Dam. So some good came out of a terrible situation years later. We're going to have the 50th year this year, anniversary of
50th anniversary, yeah.
Yeah, and I talked to Kelly some time back and asked him if we might be able to, and the reason I specifically asked Kelly is because last meeting we had Public Works and Parks and Recreation, and I thought that might be a good idea if we could have some type of get-together at the parking lot behind the Armory.
Okay, you want to do it on June 16th?
Well, if we can.
Yeah, so, thanks to you.
Erica, can you stand up?
We've been talking about what that could look like. I've reached out to the Greenway Foundation, and we've talked about it. We're working on what that could look like. John specifically made a recommendation that it should be something during the weekend so that people can actually attend. And so obviously it would be something that people would have to come to, and so we need to make sure that, that it's interesting, that it's informative, and that we give people something to learn.
A learning experience.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for the city to bring specifically those two departments together. Public Works and Parks, they should be a part of that because they're the stewards of that landmass. So
Well, urban drainage too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and urban drainage, I feel like they might be doing something, but not in this neighborhood, and just trying to figure out what that is and if we can
Great.
bring it back to the neighborhood.
Okay.
And I really, and I'm sincere, I'm not fooling around. I'd like to see the mayor be there because the only reason that work started on the Platte River back in the 70s, and I was intricately involved in it, is that we had a mayor who, incidentally, I never supported. We had differences of opinion, strong. But he said, this is what we need to do. And he exerted some strong leadership in his choice of Joe Shoemaker, who headed up that committee, and we went to work. I think our mayor needs to bring Public Works and Parks and Recreation together because they're the stewards of that property there. And we, what better time than the commemoration of the 50th year of the Great Flood. So in fact, I'm thinking about writing a letter to the mayor myself and having as many people that live here sign it. But
Which all the more reason why we got to pick a date. Right?
Okay.
Because if we're going to get the mayor, I mean, that would be one reason to push it
okay.
a little later in June. We can start to activate that conversation.
Yeah, the date would be great, but it's in the middle of the week, so whatever date works best.
Okay. All right, guys.
So yeah, if you have any ideas of any thoughts about that, let me know.
But we'll get to work. I mean, we're prepared to.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks for
Thank you,
coming. Have a
guys.
good night.
Thank you.
Hey, is there somebody that